Chapter 147. A Miracle Working Doctor. Ling Mo was confused and said in a low voice, Qi Xianqing is back. But he is the royal preceptor. It's unclear whether he is an enemy or a friend. How can he treat Qinglan? Ling Li shook his head and didn't say anything. He picked up a file and threw it to Ling Mo. Ling Mo took it and opened it. Suddenly, his face changed dramatically. The weird girl actually came to Yunjing. Ling Xian listened on the side. How could she not understand that they were talking about Su Li? And it seemed that both the master and Ling Mo had contact with Su Li. Thinking of this, Ling Xian suddenly said, she is the apprentice of Qi Xianqing. She can't distinguish friend or foe. Master, you'd better be careful. Ling Mo looked back at Ling Xian, whose beautiful eyes were full of worry. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. It seemed that it was too late to say this. The girl not only knew the origin of him and Ling Li when they met, but also behaved very strangely. It seemed that Su Li had a deep relationship with the young master. But as the sword in the young master's hand, he didn't listen to some things that he shouldn't listen to. He was not very clear about the relationship between Su Li and the young master, but he was sure that Su Li would not be the young master's enemy. The girl worked hard to make the body immune to all poisons for master. If she was the enemy, it would be ridiculous. I'm sure that she will not be my enemy, Ling Li asserted. Ling Xian was worried, but she didn't dare to refute. She had a hunch that if she questioned the identity of Su Li again, master would be angry. The people around her haven't come yet. Although she has the identity of the lecturer of the affiliated school to cover for her recently, it's hard to guarantee that she won't be plotted against. Ling Mo, send someone to protect her secretly. Ling Li walked around and gave an order. Ling Mo suddenly felt strange. Did the girl who was full of poison need to be protected? Besides, master, did you forget that you annoyed her and were driven out of the valley by her? Ling Mo thought about these questions for a few times, but he couldn't ask them. Instead, he obediently carried out the order. He was calculating how high the cultivation of the people he needed to send to prevent Su Li from noticing the people in the dark. Ling Xian saw Ling Mo obediently leave. She gently closed her mouth and her eyes were deep. No one knew what she was thinking. In the Su house. Big brother, do I have to go to the banquet tonight? Su Li heard that Su Qingtan asked her to prepare clothes. She couldn't help but be slightly stunned. During the day, she heard that Ling Ping of the Ling family came back victorious. There would be a small banquet in the evening. Only the childs and daughters of prominent aristocratic families or officials of the imperial court were qualified to attend. Su Qingtan smiled gently and touched Su Li's nose. He said, silly girl, you are now the lecturer of the affiliated school and the junior sister apprentice of the emperor. In terms of status, who can compare to you? I, your big brother, am the one who barely meets the standard. It's all thanks to you that I was invited. Big brother, don't say that. Su Li was embarrassed and said, I heard that it was a blind date for General Ling Ping. I don't want to get married yet. Su Qingtan was stunned at first, and then he laughed and said, girl, you haven't shown your position yet. You are Qi Xianqing's last disciple. If you don't want to marry, no one can force you. Tonight, you can go there to see the scenery of the waterside pavilion. In fact, if I didn't hear that Lord Chengong had returned, I wouldn't have bothered to go. Ha! Chengong. Su Li's eyes flashed. She had only been in Yunjing for a few days, but she had heard this name more than once. She must check the details of this person later. Her big brother worshipped him, but others said that he was more like a fierce tiger. Su Qingtan told Su Li to dress up quickly, and then he returned to his room to change clothes. Squeak, the wooden door made a light sound. Su Li heard the sound and looked back. She saw that Su Zipei appeared at the door as soon as Su Qingtan left. Su Zipei pinched the corner of her clothes with her hands and looked embarrassed. Third sister, come in and tell me what you want. Su Li smiled and said slowly. Su Zipei was relieved. She walked in and gently closed the door. But she couldn't stop the crazy jealousy and hatred in her heart. Until now, she found that she had fallen to the point that every word and deed needed Su Li's approval. Su Li came to Yunjing City for only 3 days, but her reputation had spread all over Yunjing. She was the last disciple of Qi Xianqing, the royal preceptor. Her beauty surpassed Wu Xiuxiu, the former first beauty in Yunjing, and she became the new first beauty in Yunjing. Not only that, she became the lecturer of the affiliated school and the first genius of the National Academy. Why? Why did all the good things fall on her head in just 3 days, and what about him? Except for the half of the jade pendant, there was nothing. Why did Su Li still get such glory without the jade pendant? Compared with Su Li, she was like a little mouse that stole something. She probed carefully on the edge, but she never got any result. Phew. Su Zipei took a breath and reluctantly emerged from the jealousy and hatred. She begged, "Second sister, I also want to go to the banquet to see the world. Can you take me with you?" Su Li looked up and down at Su Zipei, who had dressed up very delicately. A jade pendant loomed on her waist. It was extraordinary. It seemed that Su Zipei didn't stop to inquire about the news when she dressed up Zhu Yan. The news of today's banquet just came out. She couldn't wait to hook up with a rich husband. In the previous life, Su Qingtan didn't come to Yunjing so early. She didn't know how Su Zipei hooked up with Wu Jin, who was far away in Yunjing, and even let her biological father recognize her as his daughter. But it didn't matter. In this life, she had enough time to observe. As long as Su Zipei wanted to get in touch with the rich and powerful families in Yunjing, there would always be flaws. But today, Su Li looked apologetic and said bitterly, "Third sister, it's my limit to go to the waterside pavilion with the eldest brother. If I take you with me, people may think that the Su family doesn't know etiquette. I just promised the eldest brother, and I can't go back on my word. Next time, I will give the opportunity to you next time. This time, I can only." Su Zipei's face was extremely distorted when she saw Su Li's sincere and guilty look. She didn't see that Su Li was acting, but she was so sincere, which made her even more disgusted. Then, a more manic anger rose from the bottom of her heart. Without thinking, Su Zipei subconsciously slapped the beautiful face in front of her. Crack! The crisp sound resounded through the room. Su Zipei touched her right face blankly and looked at Su Qingtan, who suddenly appeared in front of her. She didn't even notice when the former arrived. Su Qingtan pulled Su Li, who looked aggrieved, behind him. His face was full of anger, like a lion that was about to bite people. Sensing that the little girl behind him pulled his sleeve, he managed to suppress his anger, but he couldn't help but scold, "What's wrong with you? Why do you have to be as vicious as your mother? Get out of here. Get out of here." Su Zipei's face was pale. She was so scared that she stumbled and fell to the ground. She hurt her hand, but she didn't care about the pain. She got up and fled the room in embarrassment. Su Qingtan had time to turn around and ask about Su Li's well-being. Su Li forced a smile and said, "Eldest brother, don't be angry. Zipei is still immature. You were almost slapped in the face, but you still said good things about her." Su Qingtan showed an expression of exasperation. "She is only 1 year younger than you. Don't defend for her in the future. Your eldest brother is not blind. I don't care about what they did before for your sake, but it doesn't mean that I don't care." Su Qingtan couldn't go on, because he found that Su Li didn't listen at all. She kept bowing her head and playing with the corner of her clothes. He sighed helplessly, "Let's go. The waterside pavilion is outside the city. It's almost time to go." "Okay." Su Li immediately raised her head and responded with a smile that was brighter than the sun. Near night, the waterside pavilion in the south of the city was brightly lit. Luxurious carriages almost completely blocked the spacious flagstone road. In order to see the outstanding young general of the Ling family, more than half of the misses in Yunjing City came. What they saw was the smell of rouge. At the same time, many young talents heard the news and came. Even if Ling Ping wanted to choose a wife, he would only choose one. As long as they performed well, they would have a great chance to marry the beauty. Because it was a banquet arranged by the imperial palace, the waiters at the door and the servants were all maids and eunuchs. Su Qingtan took Su Li out of the carriage and was instantly shocked by the scene at the door. He finally knew what it meant to be crowded. If the people who came and went were not dressed in luxurious clothes, he would think that he came to the most prosperous street in Yunjing City. When they approached the door, an old eunuch with extraordinary momentum immediately came to greet them. I have heard from His Majesty that there is a little genius in Yunjing City. Are you Miss Su Li? Su Qingtan was shocked when he saw the old eunuch. He quickly saluted and said, You are Eunuch Feng, the director of the imperial palace. Su Li immediately followed and saluted. The old eunuch immediately waved his hand and smiled very kindly. He said in a sharp voice, Lord Su is so polite. In addition to arranging the banquet for General Ling, I also have an oral order from His Majesty to pass to Miss Su Li. Su Li was flattered and said, Since it is His Majesty's oral order, Su Li will obey it. Eunuch Feng, please tell me clearly. Eunuch Feng was very happy. This girl was much more sensible than the boy before. When he thought that the boy heard his words and turned away, so that he was punished in front of His Majesty, Eunuch Feng couldn't help but have a toothache. Thinking of this, Eunuch Feng looked at Su Li more kindly and said, Miss Su Li, don't be nervous. It is just an order from His Majesty. If Miss Su Li is free, you can go to the Imperial Palace to see His Majesty and chat with him. His Majesty said that he hasn't seen the royal preceptor for more than 10 years and misses him very much. Su Li nodded slightly, but then shook her head and said, My master told me that I should finish the homework in the National Book Tower as soon as possible after I arrive in the capital city. I am not allowed to enter the Imperial Palace or be distracted. Although Su Li wants to go, I can't disobey my master's order. So, I have to offend him. Eunuch Feng's face trembled and he immediately felt a toothache. Su Li didn't go after he talked for a long time. She was exactly the same as that boy. But on the surface, Eunuch Feng still showed a smile and said, I see. Since it is an order from the royal preceptor, I will tell His Majesty truthfully. Thank you, Eunuch Feng. Su Li bowed apologetically and watched Eunuch Feng leave. Su Qingtan was on tenterhooks. After Eunuch Feng left, he couldn't help but ask in a low voice, Did Dr. Qi really give such an order? Although Su Qingtan knew Qi Xianqing's identity, he was still used to calling him Dr. Qi. Su Li stuck out her tongue and replied, Of course. Otherwise, do you think I will lie for this matter? No, I won't. Su Qingtan shook his head and said. He wondered why Qi Xianqing didn't let Su Li enter the imperial palace to meet the emperor. What was he worried about? After fooling Su Qingtan, Su Li felt helpless. The emperor of the Dahan country was absolutely a dangerous person. The seniors in the imperial palace were enough to make her afraid. In order not to expose too much, she could only let Qi Xianqing take the blame. Su Qingtan looked around and didn't see Chen Gong or Ling Qinglan. He couldn't help but doubt whether he was cheated by Ling Qinglan. But since they were here, it was good to go to the waterside pavilion with Su Li before the banquet began. Chapter 148. When Su Li and Su Qingtan turned around, the whole manor was so quiet that even the sound of a needle falling could be heard. Clang! There was a heavy sound. In front of the gate of the manor, the crowded guests had different expressions, but they all made way for them. Su Li finally saw who it was. She saw 4 sturdy men carrying a brand new huge black coffin. They walked in firmly. The sound just now was the sound of the coffin falling to the ground. Behind the coffin, there was a brother and sister in luxurious clothes. The boy was as gentle as jade with a smile on his face. The girl was extremely beautiful and mischievous. They were a perfect couple. However, the smiles of the 2 people behind the coffin would only make people feel cold and not warm at all. It's the child and daughter of the Wu family. Only the Wu family sends the coffin at the banquet of the Ling family. This is a banquet hosted by His Majesty the Emperor. Isn't young Master Wu a little too bold? Hush! Be quiet. Su Qingtan and Wu Jin immediately stood in front of Su Li. This person was not a playboy, but a talented student of the College of Martial Arts of the National Academy. Su Li's identity couldn't control him. Besides, Su Qingtan once heard from Ling Qinglan that this person was not happy without women. If he saw the second sister, it would definitely cause unnecessary trouble. Su Li gently put her hands on Su Qingtan's shoulder. She showed a pair of faint eyes, and a red light flashed in her dark pupils. Wu Jin. In this life, I finally see you. I really don't know how long you can live under my means in this life. Wu Jin didn't notice Su Li's gaze. There were at least 800 people watching the show in front of the manor. There were too many people looking at him. He couldn't distinguish all of them. Well, put it down here. Wu Jin gave an order. The 4 sturdy men immediately threw the coffin down. The coffin was extremely heavy. It fell to the ground with a loud bang. Ling Ping, who got the news, finally appeared in front of the lobby. When he saw the black wooden coffin, his face was completely gloomy. Wu Jin, do you really think that I dare not to hurt you with the protection of General Wu? With Ling Ping's words, an extremely fierce pneuma spread from him. That was the horrible killing intent condensed from killing enemies on the battlefield. The guests nearby were frightened by the momentum. Their faces turned pale in an instant and they retreated far away. Su Li was also pulled into the crowd by Su Qingtan, and there was a large empty circle in the field. Wu Jin was the first to bear the brunt. His face was slightly pale, but he did not panic. Instead, he clasped his hands and said, "Second brother Ling, why are you angry? This gift is something that I thought about for a full 3 days before I came up with. Coffins were official positions and wealth. Both are things of fame and fortune. Is it wrong for me to congratulate second brother on his promotion and wealth?" Before Wu Jin finished his words, the girl hiding behind him immediately said, "Brother is right. Second young Master Ling, my brother has good intentions. Even if he were to stand in front of the emperor, he would still be able to reason with him. You're so angry, it's really disappointing for me and my brother." The clear and melodious voice that was like that of an oriole, coupled with the young girl's almost perfect and tender appearance, actually caused the atmosphere to slightly ease up. Many guests sighed in their hearts, Wu Xiuxiu. She really deserves the title of the former first beauty in Yunjing City. It's a pity that there is another Su Li in Yunjing City. I heard that she is really a fairy. Although Wu Xiuxiu is beautiful, she is still an ordinary person. She can't be compared with her. Maybe the voice of the last sentence was a little loud. Wu Xiuxiu suddenly turned her head and looked at the group of guests who were whispering. Her beautiful eyes were full of gloominess and anger. How could she hear that? A group of guests shrank their necks and no longer dared to speak. At this time, Ling Ping restrained his momentum and his face became calm. But his tone was still cold. "Master Wu, I appreciate your kindness. Please take this coffin back. Our Ling family can't use it." Wu Jin heard it and clapped his hands. He was full of pity and sighed, "What can we do? In order to send a gift to second brother Ling, I specially inquired about your height and size. This coffin is tailor-made for you. Other people can't fit it." As soon as he said that, the field was quiet again. Many people were shocked. Wu Jin clearly cursed Ling Ping to die on purpose. If they were to encounter such a congratulatory message that was filled with malice, they would have flown into a rage long ago. Ling Ping took a deep breath and pointed at the gate of the manor expressionlessly. "For the sake of His Majesty, I won't care about the coffin with you. But if you dare to offend him again, even if His Majesty blames me, I will kill you here." Wu Jin's pupils shrank and he laughed repeatedly. "Second brother Ling, don't be angry. Since I am not welcome, I will leave. But, this coffin." Boom! Before Wu Jin finished his words, Ling Ping struck with his palm. The wind from the palm scraped along Wu Jin's face. Wu Jin was in pain. Finally, the palm fell on the coffin. The coffin made of solid wood instantly became scattered sawdust. Wu Xiuxiu screamed. Wu Jin covered his red right face and looked terrible. Ling Ping smiled and showed his shining white teeth. He said, "This slap is for your father to teach you a lesson. Remember it well. Otherwise, your father will die before you one day." "It's so pitiful," Ling Ping said. Wu Jin's eyes became fiercer when he heard that, but he soon calmed down. He smiled and said respectfully, "Second brother Ling, thank you for your advice. Since you don't welcome us today, we will leave now." Then, Wu Jin turned around and left. "Brother, wait for me." Wu Xiuxiu chased after him with hatred. Before leaving, she glanced at the guests next to her and saw Su Li behind Su Qingtan. Her face was really more beautiful than hers. They just looked at each other, but Wu Xiuxiu panicked for no reason. It seemed that there was a voice in her heart telling her that Su Li was her top enemy and must be eradicated as soon as possible. "Wu Xiuxiu, your eldest brother has left. Do you want to stay to attend my banquet?" Ling Ping's words suddenly came from behind. Wu Xiuxiu trembled slightly. She didn't have time to think too much and immediately turned around to chase Wu Jin, who had gone far away. The banquet returned to peace, but the atmosphere was not good. Everyone at the banquet was talking about the struggle between the Ling family and the Wu family. There was no meaning of a blind date. In addition, although the Ling family was supported by Ling Ping, it was not as powerful as the Wu family. After weighing the weight of the two families, many young ladies suddenly didn't want to play up to the Ling family. Ling Ping had never thought about getting married and having children, so his expression was normal. After drinking with everyone for a while, he went to the inner hall, as if there were important guests there. "It must be Lord Qingong." Su Qingtan showed a regretful expression. What Ling Qinglan said was right, but he didn't say that he was not qualified to go into the inner hall to meet his idol. He came to the banquet in vain. "Eldest brother, don't be discouraged. Since that lord is your idol, he must be noble. If there is a chance in the future, there will be a chance to meet and talk with him." Su Li comforted him softly. Su Qingtan couldn't help but laugh. "You little girl, don't you know who Lord Qingong is? He is noble, but he is not a person who is easy to get along with. I just want to see him from a distance. As for talking with him, forget it." Su Li responded and didn't say much. She was more and more curious about who Qingong was. In the middle of the night, the banquet was over. Su Qingtan went back with regret. In the end, he didn't see Qingong coming out of the gate of the manor. The next morning, Su Li came to the affiliated school of the National Academy. There was still no one in the affiliated school. In fact, as a lecturer of the affiliated school, she could order the National Academy to inform the families and even threaten that if they didn't come, she would expel those playboys from the National Academy. But she didn't do that. She was not the senior fellow apprentice. She didn't have so many new medicines to experiment. If those playboys didn't come, she was happy to be quiet. She could hide in the alchemy room of the affiliated school to refine medicine and practice. It couldn't be more comfortable. Why did she ask for trouble? But, so many days have passed. Haven't Fang Yuan and others entered the city yet? Su Li frowned slightly. Adding up the time spent on the road, it had been a month. Fang Yuan and others didn't have the burden of the carriage of the Su family. It didn't take them much time to come to Yunjing. Why did it take so long? Although it was strange, Su Li didn't worry too much. She had told the three of them about the Hehuan sect. If they still died in the hands of the Hehuan sect, they could only blame themselves. After a day's practice, Su Li went back as usual. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the street, which was splendid and pleasing to the eye. It seems that there are fewer people on the street today. Su Li lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked outside. Suddenly, The carriage shook and instantly sped up into the dark alley next to it. Suli noticed it earlier and immediately jumped out of the window. She rolled a few times like a gourd. Before she could stand firm, buzz. 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 6 arrows were shot from different directions. In the blink of an eye, all the dodging angles were blocked. Suli's pupils shrank slightly. She shook her sleeves and a dagger slipped out. She waved the dagger to block 3 of the arrows. Then she immediately jumped away and fled deeper into the alley. At the same time, the inborn psychic awareness quietly flowed like mercury. The 9 killers in the dark immediately had no place to hide. 9 people in the acquired 9th hurdle. With her cultivation, she could deal with these people in an instant, but she couldn't do that. She wasn't sure if there were other eyes watching this scene. If she really made a move, it was very likely that she would expose herself, and that would be truly dangerous. The head of the killers hiding at the street corner outside saw Suli escape inside and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Although this silly girl had the cultivation of the acquired 8th hurdle, she had little experience in fighting. She actually took the initiative to escape to a place with few people. It really saved them a lot of trouble. Whoosh! 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 Thinking of this, the head of the killers waved his hand. The other 8 killers immediately moved and rushed into the dark alley with awe-inspiring killing intent. With the inborn psychic awareness, Suli knew the terrain very well. She could always detect the killers coming and avoid them in advance. Seeing the 9 killers scurrying in the alley like headless flies, Suli was not very happy. She had already noticed that the structure of the alley was simple. There were only 8 exits. If the killers searched everywhere, she would definitely be found. What should she do? Suddenly, Suli saw another person appear at the corner of the dark alley in her psychic awareness. There were no black-masked killers around. This person looked more than 40 years old. He wore a blue cloth which was very shabby. A corner of the cloth was torn off and covered his face. Obviously, he just came in with a mask and was not with the 9 people. What's the matter? Suli frowned slightly. She clearly saw that this person's cultivation reached the peak of the acquired realm. It was impossible that he didn't know that this was a killing trap. How could he come into the alley and get involved in this mess? Seeing that the person was getting closer and closer to her hiding place, Suli only thought for a few seconds and took the initiative to breathe heavily. Sure enough, the person was happy after hearing that and immediately rushed to Suli. Chapter 149. The middle-aged man in blue hesitated for a moment before he approached her and said in a very low voice, "Little girl, I am here to save you. Come out quickly and leave with me." Suli put away the dagger and stood out of the haystack with a panicked look. Seeing this, the middle-aged man in blue softened his eyes and immediately took Suli along the alley to a locked iron gate of a courtyard. Then Suli saw him take out a key. With the help of the middle-aged man in blue, Suli was able to climb out of the back window of the house and left the alley without being noticed. Before she left, she saw in her psychic awareness that the 9 killers were still in the alley and were conducting a carpet search. At this moment, it was already dark and there were few people on the street. The middle-aged man in blue seemed to be worried and didn't let Suli go home by herself. Instead, he took Suli to walk through the streets and alleys and came to a house that looked very dilapidated. The middle-aged man in blue pushed the door open and let Suli in. While taking off the cloth, he said, "It's too dangerous at night. This is my home. If you don't mind, you can stay here for one night and go home in the morning." Suli saw the face of the middle-aged man in blue. It was very ordinary. He was the kind of person who would be ignored in common people. The only eye-catching thing was his messy beard. I don't mind. Suli quickly shook her head and then made a salute. "Uncle, thank you for saving my life." The middle-aged man in blue was expressionless and didn't respond to Suli's gratitude. He turned around and said, "I'll see if there is anything to eat in the house." This reaction made Suli slightly stunned. It seemed that the middle-aged man's temperament was a bit interesting. He was serious in speech and manner and seemed to have a heart of stone. He didn't seem to be the kind of person who would save people, but he saved her. Interesting. Suli thought of this and followed the middle-aged man in blue into the house. What she saw made her stunned again. Was there really someone living in this place? The seemingly spacious main hall of the house had no other furniture except a table and 2 chairs. It was empty as if it had been emptied. Suli went to the inner room and saw that there was nothing but a bed in the room, not even clothes. At this time, the middle-aged man in blue came out with 2 bowls of noodles and placed them on the table. He said in an old-fashioned voice, "Come and have some noodles." The voice seemed to lack the emotions of a human and sounded more like a robot. Suli heard the sound and came out. Seeing 2 bowls of simple water on the table, she didn't show any other strange expression. She sat down and picked up the chopsticks to eat. Such a reaction made the middle-aged man in blue surprised. It seemed that in his guess, Suli was dressed like a daughter of a noble family. Even if Bai Shui had good self-restraint, she couldn't eat it. Sensing the gaze of the middle-aged man in blue, Suli smiled and said, "Although I am dressed like this, I didn't even have a meal when I was a child." The white water surface was already very good. "By the way, eldest uncle, I haven't asked for your name yet." "My name is Suli. I forgot to tell you my name just now." "I'm sorry." "Suli." The eyes of the middle-aged man in blue suddenly became sharp. "Which Suli?" "Suli of the National Academy." Suli smiled embarrassedly. "I didn't expect you to recognize me." The middle-aged man in blue didn't want to chat with Suli. Instead, he looked at her with burning eyes and said in a cold voice, "Do you know the background of those killers?" Suli was stunned. The tone of the middle-aged man in blue reminded her of some unpleasant past events. Seeing Suli's silence, the middle-aged man in blue came to his sense. Suli was not his prisoner. He smiled bitterly in his heart and reluctantly pulled the corner of his mouth, revealing a smile that he thought was kind but was actually as scary as a ghost. "I scared you. Those killers are likely to be related to the case I am investigating, so I am a little excited. Miss Su, please don't blame me." Suli's eyes flashed, but her tone was naive. "Investigation? Are you also a member of the Supreme Judiciary, like my eldest brother?" The middle-aged man in blue was silent for a moment and then said, "In addition to the Supreme Judiciary, there is another place to investigate cases. I am Chen Gong of the Ministry of Penalty." Suli's pupils shrank slightly. This person was the ruthless official of the Ministry of Penalty. Su Qingtan repeatedly mentioned the name of Chen Gong, so she went to the National Book Tower to check it today. Then she knew that Chen Gong was a famous ruthless official of the Dahan country. He was noble and upright. He never accepted bribes and his family was as poor as a church. On the other hand, he used cruel means to torture prisoners. Even the subordinates of the Ministry of Penalty couldn't stand it. Every family in the Dahan country even used the name of Chen Gong to frighten their children. He was really a ruthless person who could stop children from crying. However, Suli looked at the plain noodles cooked by Lord Chen, whose hands were full of blood. It seemed that he was not as ruthless as the rumor said. However, his family was really as poor as a church. It was appropriate to use the 4 bare walls to describe the situation. "It seems that you have heard of this name. If you can't eat the noodles, don't eat them." Chen Gong's voice was flat. There was no joy or sorrow on his face. No one could know what he was thinking. Suli smiled and took another mouthful of noodles. When Chen Gong's expression changed slightly, she analyzed, "I am not very clear about the background of the 4 people. I just saw that there were few people on the street, so I was alert." Later, the carriage suddenly got out of control. I jumped out of the carriage in time. But I was too scared at that time and hid in the alley when I saw it. Chen Gong frowned. He didn't get any clue from Suli's words. When he looked up, he saw the girl stick out her tongue. His heart softened unconsciously. If she was still alive, their daughter should be 12 or 13 years old. After eating the noodles, Suli took the initiative to clean up the dishes. Chen Gong looked at her petite back. His eyes full of vicissitudes were full of bitterness. He murmured, "You don't allow me to bring a woman back. This girl is 1 or 2 years older than our daughter. She shouldn't be counted." After cleaning up quickly, Suli returned to the house, but she didn't see Chen Gong. She spread out her psychic awareness and found that there was a room behind the house. She immediately looked for it and walked to the door. Before she stepped in, she heard a cold shout inside the door, "Stop!" It was Chen Gong. Suli stopped and retreated to the door again. But it didn't prevent her from seeing the scene in the room clearly. Were those lanterns? There were all kinds of colorful lanterns in the room. They were all connected with ropes and hung in the air. The ground was covered with the traces of burning candles, which were very thick. It seemed that the candles had been burned dozens or even hundreds of times. Chen Gong stood in the lanterns with his back to Suli. He didn't say anything, but Suli could feel his breath, which was heavy and decadent. After a while, Suli didn't disobey Chen Gong's order and turned away. She rested in the room for a night and didn't see Chen Gong come back. It seemed that he stood in the room for a whole night. At dawn the next day, Suli got up and tidied up the floor. When she came to the kitchen, she saw that there was nothing except flour. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. It was rare that Chen Gong had the strength to investigate the case even though he ate plain water every day. Walking to the vegetable field in the backyard, Suli finally found a few cabbages and onions. She picked them and added some fresh seasonings she carried with her. Soon, 2 bowls of fragrant yangchun noodles were made. When Suli put the noodles on the table, Chen Gong came out from the back room. He sniffed and saw 2 bowls of yangchun noodles on the table. He couldn't help but be stunned. "Uncle Chen, I can't repay you for saving my life yesterday. I can only make a bowl of noodles as a token of appreciation." Suli took the chopsticks and handed them to him with a bright smile. "I haven't cooked for a long time. Have a taste, uncle." Chen Gong lowered his head and hesitated for a moment. Then he took the chopsticks and picked up the noodles. He took a bite and chewed it. Then he started to eat. The sound of slurping was endless. Seeing that he was eating happily, Suli immediately handed her bowl to him. Chen Gong didn't refuse. He took it and continued to eat. His cheeks were bulging, and he didn't say a word from beginning to end. Soon, the second bowl was finished. Suli smiled and squinted her eyes. She would be very happy if someone liked to eat what she cooked. "Uncle, wait for me. I'll cook again." Then Suli got up and went to the kitchen. When she turned her back, she didn't see the stern middle-aged official behind her. He lowered his head and wiped his face with his hands. In the kitchen, Suli took the flour and poured it out. Chen Gong suddenly appeared at the door and said in a deep voice, "It's enough. You go back and tell your family that you are safe. I'm leaving." Before Suli replied, Chen Gong turned around and went into the room. It didn't take long for him to change into an official uniform and leave the yard. The door of the yard was not locked. Suli stopped what she was doing. Her eyes were shining. Chen Gong, whom her eldest brother worshipped, seemed to be a little interesting. After cleaning up and closing the gate of the courtyard, Suli returned to the Su house along the busy street. Su Qingtan just came back after a night's search. He was anxious in the room. Seeing Suli come back safe and sound, he was overjoyed and hugged Suli tightly. "You little girl, I didn't see you all night. Do you want me to die of worry?" "Eldest brother, I almost couldn't come back." Suli's nose turned sour and tears fell down. Su Qingtan felt distressed. He quickly coaxed her and listened to what happened yesterday. "Were there killers? Did Lord Chen Gong save you?" Su Qingtan was full of fear. If Qin Gong didn't save Su Li, he didn't dare to think about the consequences yesterday. Second sister didn't offend anyone in Yunjing. How could there be killers? Su Qingtan was puzzled. He had tried his best to let Su Li live in seclusion. She didn't go to other places except the National Academy. Even at the banquet last time, he tried his best to stop Su Li from being seen by the people of the Wu family. In this way, there was still trouble. For the first time, Su Qingtan felt that the forces in Yunjing City were full of malice. It doesn't matter, eldest brother. After this, I will go to the crowded street and won't take a carriage casually. I believe that those bad guys won't be so rampant to kill me in broad daylight. Su Li comforted him softly. Su Qingtan couldn't help but sigh. She was in danger, but she comforted him. Li, you finally come back. We are worried about you. Su Huanli appeared outside the door. When he saw Su Li, his eyes brightened. He immediately came in and said, by the way, Li, the new place of the Baiwei building has been selected. The new site of the Baiwei building has been selected. You can go there today to see if it is suitable. If it is suitable, immediately design the kitchen boiler. I will order someone to repair it. Su Qingtan frowned and said in a low voice, Father, second sister just escaped from death. She needs a rest. The matter of the Baiwei building is not urgent. Let's talk about it later. What later? Su Huanli suddenly became angry and loudly scolded, You are not in charge of the family. You don't know the price of daily necessities. Our Su family has moved to Yunjing for a month. The maids needed money, the servants also needed money, and the food, clothing, and daily necessities all needed money. And the medicine for your first aunt's injury is not cheap. If it goes on like this, we will all have nothing to eat. Chapter 150. Look, your second sister said so. Su Huanli's face brightened and he was not angry anymore. He immediately pulled Su Li to go out. Su Qingtan was helpless. He pointed at Su Li for a long time without saying anything. Finally, he could only say with concern, Be careful on the way. I know, eldest brother. Su Li smiled sweetly and left with Su Huanli in the carriage. After they left, Su Qingtan looked a little gloomy. He must find out the killer. Otherwise, he always felt uncomfortable being stared at in the dark. Su Huanli took Su Li to the most prosperous Zhongtan Street in Yunjing City. This road was the main road of Yunjing City. It was connected with the gate of Yunjing City and the gate of the Imperial City. It was the most crowded place in the entire Yunjing City. Every year, the Imperial Court's sacrifice team would pass here. The rent was astronomical, and the Su family could not afford it at all. Father, do you want to buy a shop on this street? Su Li couldn't help but ask. Su Huanli's face trembled and he scolded with a smile, You little girl, what nonsense are you talking about? How can our Su family afford to buy a shop on Zhongtan Street? While talking, the carriage drove into the alley on the side of Middle Altar Street and passed through to the second-class Back Altar Street. There were not many things here, but there were many inns, restaurants, and wineries. Moreover, because of the terrain, people could still see the good scenery of Zhongtan Street from the second floor of Houghton Street as long as there were no tall buildings blocking the view. Su Huanli pointed to the empty two-story shop with 3 windows at the corner of the street and said, Look. It is the best place in the whole Houghton Street. Your grandma and I think that the location of the Baiwei building can't be bad. Let's rent this restaurant for 3 months first. It's not too late to buy it after we earn enough money. Su Li's eyes flashed. She didn't expect that Su Huanli was smart in business and chose such a good location. Father, how much is the rent of this shop a month? Su Huanli was excited and said, It's 10,000 taels a month. Li, you have to work hard to earn back the rent every month. Otherwise, I will lose a lot. Although he said so, Su Huanli's face was red. The taste of the beggar's chicken and the location of the restaurant were natural advantages. The business couldn't be bad. I will do my best. After Suli entered the shop, she was busy designing the kitchen boiler and adjusting the layout of the building. A day passed unconsciously. Under her adjustment, the ordinary decoration of the restaurant with no highlights became fresh and elegant with the embellishment of potted ornaments, which made people's eyes light up. All right. You deserve to be my daughter. You are good at doing business. Haha. Su Huanli laughed heartily. Now, only the plaque of the restaurant and the back kitchen were not ready. After these two things were ready, he could open the restaurant on a good day. When Suli went to the second floor, she was surprised to see the name of a restaurant diagonally opposite. Solitary Abode. The name of the Byway building was the same as that of the Byway building, and it was suppressed by the name of the Byway building. When the Byway building was built, the Byway building and the Byway building would be at loggerheads with each other. Troubles were inevitable. However, she didn't remind Su Huanli. How much the Su family earned had nothing to do with her, right? In the next 2 days, Suli resumed her normal life. She practiced hard in the affiliated school every day. There were enough elixirs in the affiliated school. Her cultivation changed almost every day. In just a few days, she jumped from the inborn third hurdle to the inborn fifth hurdle. The reason was that she had accumulated in the inborn third hurdle. But this speed was really shocking. It overturned the saying that the cultivation progress was slow after the inborn hurdle. When Suli was striving to reach the inborn sixth hurdle, Fang Yuan and the other two finally came to Yunjing City. They didn't go to find Suli immediately. Instead, they left the people of the Tianya house and bought a yard in the city as a temporary place to rest. Not long after they entered the city, the news came to Ling Li's ears. It's 10 days late, and they disappeared immediately after entering the city. Ling Li rubbed his chin and smiled slightly. She finally used the wooden token he left. However, it was not a good thing that Suli moved the secret force into the city. Thinking of the news from the Tianya house, Ling Li frowned. The situation in Yunjing City was getting more and more complicated. Master, Suli was assassinated 2 days ago. Finally, she was rescued by Qin Gong. Our people didn't help her. Ling Mo meant that the group of killers actually couldn't do anything to Suli. Ling Li said, what is her cultivation? Ling Li glanced at Ling Xian who was listening quietly and said, the acquired eighth hurdle. Hearing this, Ling Xian's eyes instantly relaxed a lot, but it was not seen by Ling Mo and Ling Li. Ling Li heard it and smiled. Half a year ago, she had reached the peak of the acquired hurdle. She could refine elixirs and help him jump 2 hurdles in the inborn hurdle. If Suli hadn't reached the inborn hurdle after such a long time, it would be a joke. But Ling Li was not sure what realm Suli had reached. He estimated that she had at least reached the inborn third hurdle. Ling Mo and Ling Xian practiced with him since childhood, but they were just in the inborn fourth hurdle. Besides, the Byway building of the Su family is about to open. Ling Mo reminded him. Ling Li smiled and said, it seems that second brother has to be a shield. Su Li's name was well known in Yunjing. Fang Yuan and the other two didn't ask much but got all the news about Su Li. They couldn't help but be speechless. They ate dirt and dust on the road, but Suli lived a comfortable life. The three made do with a dinner and had a comfortable sleep. The next day, they finally recovered their spirits and began to look for a new location for the Linli building. Suli had a requirement for the new location of the Linli building. It must not be within 10 miles of the imperial city. She couldn't choose any place within 10 miles of Yunjing City. Because the ground of Yunjing City within 10 miles was extremely hard white stone. It was too difficult to dig out an underground space. The wine of the Linli building was unique. It was not afraid that other wineries would follow suit. Even if the location was a little remote, it didn't matter. People who liked wine would come to the Linli building. There were many shops that met Su Li's requirements. The three shopped for a long time and selected 10 shops. Finally, they decided to let Su Li decide. At midnight, a dart was shot on the edge of Su Li's bed. Su Li opened her eyes and took down the dart. She opened the note tied to it. It was a word, Fong. Su Li put on the black clothes and listened to Su Qingtan's voice for a while. After confirming that Su Qingtan was in a deep sleep, she flew to the roof like a night elf and flew straight to the direction where the dart came from. It didn't take long for her to find Fong Yuan hiding in the dark of the alley. Fong Yuan didn't see Su Li for a long time. He stood up in a panic. When he was about to speak, Su Li covered his mouth with her fingertips and transmitted the sound in silence. Yunjing City is not like the Qinghe town. It is dangerous at night. Don't make a sound. Take me to your yard first. Fong Yuan calmed down and nodded slightly. Then he flashed out to lead the way. After a while, Su Li took off the black hood and looked at the yard. She praised, "It's very good. The location of the yard is secluded. It's a good place to stay." Chu Qingning and Yin Xiudong heard the sound and came out. They were happy to see Su Li. Although all of them had good brains and good cultivation, if they didn't have Su Li as the backbone, they would be in a state of disunity. They couldn't form a fighting force at all. Let's go in and talk about it. Su Li stretched out her hands and used her psychic awareness to explore the surroundings. Then she took them into the yard with confidence. There were too many seniors in Yunjing City. The inborn fifth hurdle was at most the upper level. She had to be careful. In the study, the four people sat opposite to each other. Yin Xiudong carefully took out the yellow and wrinkled thin paper from the wooden box and said, "Fortunately, we got there in time. After we got it by some means, we were chased by the officers and soldiers the next day." Lin Xiang had died in the exile team. Seeing so many thin papers, Su Li couldn't help but stare. She picked up one of them and looked at it carefully. There is another thing worth noting. Chu Qingning added with a strange look. Lin Yanqing disappeared. When we went there, we didn't see him. It seemed that he disappeared directly from the team. If he is alive, we don't see him. If he is dead, we don't see his corpse. It's really weird. Su Li glanced at the three words, Hengchen powder, on the thin paper. Her eyes flashed with extremely bright light. She said lightly, "Don't worry about Lin Yanqing. He has some qualifications. It's not strange that he is taken away by people in the martial arts circle. Those sects disdain killing in the secular world. Most of them, Lin Yanqing will do it himself later. But Yan Hongxiu has a spiritual bow. I also gave Yan Zai a lucky chance. It's hard to say whether Lin Yanqing can save the brother and sister." Fong Yuan was at ease and was not surprised. Su Li always liked to arrange all things well. It seemed that she could predict the future. Even if there was an accident, she would quickly find a remedy. This was the charm of her personality. "Well, let's not talk about that." Su Li put the thin paper close to her body and then said, "When you entered the city today, did you go to see the site of the Linli building?" "Of course." Chu Qingning immediately became complacent. He took out the map of Yunjing City from his arms and spread it on the table. There were 10 red circles marked on the map. They were the last 10 after they screamed. Su Li slightly squinted her eyes. Without hesitation, she pointed at one of them. Yin Xiudong came over to have a look and felt strange. They had eliminated this shop before. The land was a little expensive, and the shop was in the alley. No one could see it at all. Why did Su Li take a fancy to it? Just do as I said. Su Li marked the location again. She had thought about it a long time ago. She asked Fong Yuan and others to find it just to deceive others, especially to deceive a shop. This time, you come to the underground adytum in person. Don't let the craftsman find it. And you have to guard against the spying of the next shop. This shop is next to a winery. It is opened by a couple who have reached the inborn realm. You have to be careful. Su Li warned. Fong Yuan and others immediately narrowed their eyes. 2 inborn masters opened a winery. Was it a joke? How about? Chu Qingning rubbed his hands and said with a smile, "How about changing the place?" He was a little flustered to open the Linli building full of secrets next to two unborn seniors. Su Li smiled and said, "How can that be? I am going to invite those two people to join me. If I change the place, I will have no chance at all." "That's settled. You three should start work early. My identity is quite sensitive now. It's not appropriate for me to show up too much." Fang Yuan nodded and said, "Don't worry. I won't let you worry too much." He already had some clues about the third hurdle of AO sword skills. Presumably, in a few months, he could surpass Luo Yichen and become the second inborn senior of the Linli building. At this moment, he still didn't know that Luo Yichen had become an inborn senior from AO sword skills in the secluded place of Dewang village. That night, Su Li quietly returned to the Su house. Fortunately, she didn't meet anyone who worked at night. The opening of the Baiwei building and the Linli building were in full swing. Thanks to Su Qingtan, Su Li didn't need help from either side. She still commuted between the Su house and the National Academy every day. Chapter 151. Crackle. After a string of loud firecrackers, the new Baiwei building was surrounded by diners who came to watch the fun. Before the opening of the Baiwei building, they had heard the news that this restaurant was related to Su Li, the first talented girl in Yunjing City. Su Li was famous. At this moment, some romantic talents who heard the news all came to see if they could see Su Li. Su Huanli, who was dressed in red clothes, was full of joy. He stood in front of the door and bowed with his hands folded in front. Then he raised his head and said loudly, "I am Su Huanli, and Su Li is my second daughter. Today is the first day of the opening of the Baiwei building. All the wine and dishes are half price." As soon as Su Huanli finished his words, the newly recruited waiters of the restaurant immediately came out to greet the guests. They even said, "Su Li." Obviously, they were ordered by Su Huanli. Miss Su is not only good at poetry, but also good at cooking. The signature dishes of this restaurant are all developed by Miss. That's right. Miss Su's cooking is comparable to that of the god of cookery. Any ingredients in her hands can be turned into magic. It's delicious. The waiters tried their best to brag. Many people who had watched the fun became interested and followed the crowd into the Baiwei building. In the blink of an eye, the Baiwei building was full. The smell of the beggar's chicken filled the street. More and more people came here following the smell. It was exactly the same as when the restaurant was opened in the Desi town. Su Huanli saw that the business of the store was very good on the first day, and he was very happy. The older, the wiser. If his mother didn't ask him to use the name of Su Li to attract customers, he really couldn't think of this trick. Su Li was asked to help in the shop by Su Huanli. She saw it but didn't say much. Because she knew that even if she went up and said it, she would only get a scolding from Su Huanli. Moreover, Su Huanli didn't realize that it was not the Yunjing city where he could do whatever he wanted. Su Li smiled faintly and glanced at the deserted Yi house diagonally opposite. Before the opening of the Baiwei building, the business of the Yi house was quite good. But today, the Baiwei building's wine and dishes were half price, and the taste was good. It would definitely affect the business of the Yi house. Presumably, the owner of the Yi house should be angry at this moment. The owner of the one-way residence was indeed furious. To be precise, he was so furious that he wanted to kill someone. A bunch of trash. If you can't even compare to a country bumpkin's restaurant, then what use do I have for you? Guards! Drag them away and feed them to the dogs. Young miss, please spare my life. Spare me. Wu Xiuxiu put her hands on her hips and pointed at the large group of waiters and shopkeepers kneeling in front of her. She was so angry that her chest was heaving and her face was pale. She was the owner of Yi Ji House. Ordinary people didn't have the right to know this information, but anyone with a bit of status and background knew it clearly. Su Li had just been in Yunjing City for a month. She was the most talented woman and the most beautiful woman in Yunjing City. Now even her restaurant was completely suppressed. Where would she put her face? If this could be tolerated, what could be tolerated? Little sister. Don't be impatient, this matter is not entirely their fault. Wu Jin comforted his sister in a gentle voice. He turned his head and his expression immediately became cold. You can avoid the death penalty, but you can't escape the punishment. Go and receive the punishment. Upon hearing this, the panic-stricken shopkeeper was overjoyed. He immediately knelt down and kowtowed. He was moved to tears. Thank you, young master. Thank you for sparing my life, young master. As he said that, he immediately led his subordinates and left in fear. Brother. Wu Xiuxiu waved Wu Jin's hand and pouted. She was full of grievance. Su Li is clearly bullying me. My restaurant is called Yi Ji House, and her restaurant is called Bai Wei Building. She also took away all my business. How can your sister face others in the future? Wu Jin couldn't help but laugh. He touched his sister's hair and teased, You already have a way, don't you? You sent Anjiu and others out without telling me. If my father knows it, you will suffer. Wu Xiuxiu's face turned golden, and then she smiled embarrassedly. She pinched the corner of her clothes and said, Xiu was angry, and nothing happened. Wu Jin's face suddenly became cold. He reprimanded her, Xiu, you are too insensible this time. Anjiu and others are the secrets of our Wu family. If they are exposed to the Ling family or other families in the imperial court, do you know the consequences? Oh. Wu Xiuxiu stamped her feet. She was angry and said, I am angry. Su Li is just a servant girl from a poor family. How can she compete with me? Brother, you don't help me. You even blame me. Are you still my brother? As she said, Wu Xiuxiu's eyes turned red. Wu Jin wiped away her tears helplessly. If I don't love you, who else will? Of course, I will help you with Su Li's business. But don't act alone in the future, in case you give yourself away. Do you understand? Wu Xiuxiu immediately smiled through tears. She hugged Wu Jin's waist and said coquettishly, I thought you were reluctant to hurt her because she was beautiful. Wu Jin gently stroked his sister's soft hair. A glimmer of light flashed through his eyes. He whispered, How could it be? Even if there are 10,000 Su Li, she can't compare with my Xiu. Ha ha ha, brother, you are lying. Wu Xiuxiu immediately laughed happily. In this world, even her parents' love for her was less than half of that of her brother. It was great that she could be her brother's sister. Last time, Anjiu and others failed. I have helped you find out the reason. Wu Jin touched Wu Xiuxiu's small nose and said, Do you know that Anjiu almost fought with Qin Gong? If Qin Gong didn't have scruples because of Su Li, he would have noticed it. Wu Xiuxiu's eyes flashed with fear. She immediately said angrily, How could that bitch be so lucky? One of the houses in the alley is Qin Gong's ancestral house. I just happened to meet it. Wu Jin shook his head and said, And Su Li is smart enough. After escaping, she didn't call a carriage on the road. She always walks in the downtown streets. It is not good to take action for the time being. How can it be? Wu Xiuxiu's happy face suddenly disappeared. Her beautiful eyes were full of fierce light. She said, Brother, you should take action as soon as possible. I don't want to see that face one more day. Wu Jin sighed helplessly and turned to look at the door of the Bai Wei building. Suddenly, he saw two familiar figures. His pupils suddenly shrank. How could they appear here? Ling Ping calmly pushed the wheelchair into the Bai Wei building. Ling Li, who was full of evil, was sitting in the wheelchair. As soon as they entered the door, the noisy hall of the restaurant immediately fell into a dead silence. Even the rich childs who were eating and drinking were frightened. They stopped what they were doing and became stiff. How could they come here? Seeing this, Ling Ping couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. When did this guy know to be shy? He insisted that Ling Ping accompany him to come here. Didn't he know how sensational it would be if he appeared with me? Thinking of this, Ling Ping showed a gentle smile on his face and said, "Today, I just come to eat with my brother." His words were like a stone thrown into a calm lake. Many childs who claimed to be talents immediately threw away a handful of broken silver and fled from another door. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the people on the first floor left. Su Huanli's hands were tired from receiving money. He saw many broken silver on the table. He was happy. Regardless of the identity of the two people who came, he immediately went to them. He rubbed his hands and said with a smile, "Guests, do you want to eat or stay here?" He said two people, but actually he looked at Ling Ping. One of them was as calm as an official, and the other was a disabled man with messy clothes. Ling Ping knew who he should ask even if he thought with his toes. But this time, he was obviously wrong. "Old guy, are you blind?" An angry shout almost scared Su Huanli to jump up. He looked down and was immediately sprayed by Ling Ping's saliva. "Damn you! Don't you see me? Ask your daughter to come out and serve me dishes and wine. Otherwise, I will tear down your restaurant." Su Huanli was stunned by the scolding. It was the first time for him to see such an arrogant master who would tear down the restaurant. His heart was filled with rage, but before he could vent it out, a waiter trembled as he walked forward and stuttered, "General Ling, young Master Ling. Miss is in the private room on the second floor. Please come in." Ling Li heard it and smiled. He pointed at the waiter and said fiercely, "What are you waiting for? Show me the way." The waiter was startled and immediately rushed to the second floor. Ling Ping shook his head helplessly. His brother's temper couldn't be changed. Fortunately, he knew to threaten Ling Ping. In the past, he was arrogant and thought that everyone in the world knew him. Wherever he went, he would tear down the restaurant and make the Ling family lose a lot of money. Seeing Ling Ping lift the wheelchair with one hand and go upstairs, Su Huanli came to his sense in a daze. His body seemed to be blown by the cold wind and he couldn't help shivering. He caught a frightened waiter and asked about the background of the person. He was instantly stunned. Just now, he almost scolded the most arrogant master in the whole Yunjing city. The Baiwei building was almost torn down. For a moment, Su Huanli was extremely grateful to the waiter who interrupted him. There was no anger in his heart, but only a deep uneasiness. Su Li should not make that person angry. Entering the private room on the second floor, Ling Ping saw Su Li sitting and waiting here. He couldn't help but be amazed. Last time, he was upset at the banquet and didn't pay attention to her. Now the environment was changed. He really felt that this woman was as beautiful as the rumor said. She deserved the first title in Yunjing City. "I'm Su Li, nice to meet you, General Ling and Master Ling." Su Li stood up and bowed slightly. Her voice was as ethereal as a bird and natural and graceful. Ling Ping praised her secretly. He pushed Ling Li into the room and said with a smile, "Miss Su Li, you don't have to be so polite. I come here today because my brother has admired you for a long time. He especially comes here to catch up with you." Although Ling Ping said the polite words, he felt pity in his heart. Although Brother Li was the best brother in his heart, to be honest, how could Brother Li deserve such an excellent woman? He was over 20 years old, and Brother Li was 17 years old. Both of them didn't get married and had children. His mother and grandmother were worried. It was not difficult for him to find a wife with his glory. However, Brother Li was handicapped and had a foppish temperament. Any family that was slightly particular would not be willing to marry their daughter to him. As for those who harbored evil intentions and wanted to enter the Ling family, mother and grandmother were worried that they would mistreat Brother Li. Ling Ping remembered that his mother heard that Brother Li liked someone and wanted to see her. She was so happy and specially asked him to help. Alas, Su Li glanced at the playboy who was sitting in the wheelchair and drooling. She couldn't help but laugh and said, "General Ling, I'm really flattered. But the identity of your brother? I'm afraid that I don't have the luck to enjoy it." As the hierarch of the Yinma cult, she really didn't have the luck to enjoy it. Ling Ping smiled bitterly. Su Li's words were naturally disgusting to him. Ling Li was angry. Su Li. It was rare for him to find a chance to see her. How could she push him away? Brother, you go out first. I'll talk to Miss Su Li in person. Chapter 152. I see. I see. Ling Li impatiently pushed Ling Ping away. He was extremely bad-tempered. Ling Ping left the room and looked back several times. He sighed in his heart that the boy was so rude and left a worse impression on Su Li. How could he get the beauty back? Don't peep or eavesdrop. Suddenly, Ling Ping heard Ling Li's voice behind him. He almost fell down. His face suddenly darkened. Originally, he really wanted to listen to what they could say, but now he was pointed out by Ling Li, so he was not interested. They were at odds with each other, so they definitely couldn't talk together. It was estimated that Brother Li would be driven out soon. After Ling Ping went out, Ling Li tilted his head and pushed the wheelchair to Su Li. His original vulgar and thirsty expression became light and gentle. His eyes that were wandering on Su Li's body became calm. He immediately became a different person from the playboy he was a moment ago. Su Li raised her eyebrows and teased, "Child Ling, your acting skills are very good." Ling Li spread his psychic awareness and saw that Ling Ping had gone to the window on the second floor to drink. His eyes lit up and he lowered his voice, "It is not difficult for you to see the situation of the Ling family. I was poisoned when I was a child. It happened, so." Su Li looked indifferent. "Stop. I am not interested in your past. What do you want me to do? I told you in the Desu town that we would never meet again. It seems that you are forgetful." Ling Li frowned slightly. He felt that Su Li was estranged from him. It seemed that she didn't want to have anything to do with him. However, his own situation. It was good that she didn't get involved. Ling Li smiled indifferently and finally put away the different feeling in his heart. He assumed the posture of a hierarch of a big sect and said, "How about making a fair deal? How much do I need to pay to cure Ling Qinglan?" Su Li smiled sweetly, "Qinghu. He is your right-hand man. If you want a fair deal, I am afraid that Hierarch Ling can't afford it." Ling Li looked calm and his eyes were firm. He said, "Go ahead." No matter how much he paid, he would save Ling Qinglan. No one was suitable for the position of Qinghu except him. Su Li sat down against Ling Li and stretched out a finger, "I want the full moon." Swish. Ling Li was horrified and shocked. Even if he knew that Su Li would embarrass him, he did not expect that she would make such an excessive request. "You're making things difficult for me." Ling Li made a low growl in his throat, but Su Li smiled brightly. "Is there anything in the world that Hierarch Ling finds difficult? Yunjing City is your territory. If the treasures auctioned in your territory fall into the hands of others, isn't it a joke?" The full moon was the legendary treasure that would be auctioned in the Yunjing auction house 1 month later. It was said that this treasure could open up the dantian of the purple mansion of the full moon and break the shackles of heaven and earth. It could break through to a higher realm without leaving the secular world and improve the power of understanding. It was really a rare treasure. The only regretful thing was that this treasure was a natural spirit pill, and it possessed an extreme yin and cold nature. Only women could consume it. If a man were to consume it, he would immediately be frozen into a popsicle. Even so, there were many talented girls in the martial arts circle. A full moon was enough to set off a reign of terror in Yunjing City. Even if the Yinma cult intervened, it would be difficult for them to escape unscathed. Ling Li originally wanted to wait and see, and then look for opportunities. Whether he could get the treasure or not depended on his luck. But Su Li's words made it necessary to get the full moon. If Ling Qinglan's life can't even be compared with a full moon, how can it be fair? Su Li smiled leisurely. "In addition to the full moon, you also need to prepare a branch of the Kurong tree." Kurong tree. Ling Li was confused. I have never heard of this name. Besides, aren't your requirements too much? Su Li got close to Ling Li's ear and whispered, in the words of your hometown, it is the branch of the phoenix perches on the phoenix tree. In short, it is almost the same. Only when I find that thing, Ling Qinglan's life can be saved. Otherwise, even if I don't have the panacea, how can I detoxify? Ling Li's eyelids twitched, and his eyes were full of complexity. Why do you say that my hometown is not here? Su Li got close to Ling Li and almost hugged him, which made the latter couldn't help but hold his breath. Su Li noticed it and chuckled softly. She touched his lips with her fingertips, which were cold to the touch. She said, because you told me in person a long, long time ago. Ling Li's heart beat faster, but he didn't expect that she was joking. He couldn't help but move Su Li's fingertips away angrily. There was a trace of anger in his voice. Forget it if you don't want to say it. Don't beat around the bush. What I said is true. Su Li sighed softly in her heart. She stood up straight and said coldly, only when you see those two things, Ling Qinglan can be saved. Child Ling, please go back. Ling Li turned the wheelchair expressionlessly. Suddenly, he felt that the person behind him grabbed the handle of the wheelchair and gently pushed it up. In a trance. He seemed to have seen this scene before. Was it a dream? Suddenly, Su Li transmitted the sound in silence coldly in his heart and interrupted his recollection. The Yanshi cult and the Hehuan sect are not easy to deal with. If you are not strong enough, don't force yourself. I don't want the body of immunity to all poisons I made by myself to die in vain. Hearing the former's cold transmission, Ling Li smiled and couldn't help but transmit the sound in silence. I cherish my life more than anyone else. Miss Su, if you have time to care about others, you'd better think about your own situation. Before he finished his words, Ling Li suddenly felt a strong force behind him. The wheelchair was pushed far away and almost hit the door. Ling Li was immediately angry. When he was about to speak, he heard Su Li deliberately raised her voice. Child Ling and I are not the same kind of people. We don't agree with each other. Child Ling, please go back. You. Ling Li stared slightly. The next moment, Ling Ping opened the door as expected. Feeling the unpleasant atmosphere in the room, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. He pushed Ling Li to apologize and went downstairs. You win. Hearing the last sentence from the playboy in the wheelchair, Su Li suddenly laughed. She laughed so much that she couldn't stand up straight. Drops of tears fell on the ground. Finally, no one knew whether she was crying or laughing. Su Huanli and Su Li returned to the Su house at 9 o'clock. The former was jubilant, while the latter was calm as usual. Su Qingtan had been waiting at the door for a long time. When he saw the carriage coming back, he was relieved and went to greet them. Qingtan. You didn't see it. The restaurant just opened today, and it was full of guests. If it wasn't for the half price on the first day, the profit could be at least 2,000 taels. It won't take long for our Su family to buy that shop and gain a firm foothold in Yunjing City. Su Qingtan was also happy for his family. He pulled Su Li and said, Father, second sister, you must be tired. Go in and have a rest. Since the business of the Baiwei building is stable, let second sister go to the National Academy. She can't fall behind in her studies. Su Huanli was unhappy when he heard that. Today, because Su Li showed up from time to time in the restaurant, the business was so good. If Su Li was not there, the restaurant couldn't make so much money. But now Su Qingtan was a high-ranking official of the Supreme Judiciary. What he said was also reasonable. He couldn't stop Su Li from going to the National Academy for the sake of money. That reason was not tenable at all and would definitely be vetoed by Su Qingtan in the end. In this case, it was better to try to win Su Li's favor. Thinking of this, Su Huanli nodded and said with a smile, of course. Studies are more important. Li, don't go to the Baiwei building tomorrow. Su Li nodded obediently and smiled sweetly, okay. Thank you, father. Su Qingtan was also gratified. His father finally understood his second sister. If he was still like his aunt and grandma, he would not be as helpless as he used to be in the Desu town and could only watch helplessly. The three of them went back to their courtyards to rest. When Su Li returned to her own courtyard, Mammy Li had already prepared bath water and supper. After Su Li took a bath and changed her clothes, it was past midnight after supper. But she found that the light in Su Qingtan's room was still on. She thought for a moment and walked to the door with the lamp. Then she pushed the door and went in. Su Qingtan was reading a case file carefully. When he heard the sound, he looked up and saw Su Li. He couldn't help but smile. "Second sister, why are you here?" "I had supper and saw that the light in your room was still on. I was worried, so I came to have a look." Su Li said and walked to Su Qingtan. "What are you doing?" "It's late. You'd better have an early rest." Su Qingtan felt warm in his heart. He bowed his head and smiled. "I see. I'll go to bed after reading this file. I'll accompany you. I haven't read with you for a long time." "What are these?" Su Li picked up the file and glanced at the words, "The Massacre of the Yi Family." She couldn't help but stare. "These are the unsettled case files of the Supreme Judiciary." Su Qingtan smiled. He took the scroll from Su Li's hand and unfolded it. Then he put it back in Su Li's hand. "These are confidential. Only the officers of the Supreme Judiciary can read them. But it's rare for second sister to read with me. I'll let you have a look." "Thank you, eldest brother." Su Li thanked him and stood behind Su Qingtan to read quietly. The file she took happened to be the first volume, which briefly introduced the Yi family. 13 years ago, the Yi family was also a rich and powerful family in Yunjing City. The head of the family, General Yi, was the deputy general of General Ling Feiqing at that time. The family was prosperous. However, no one knew what enemies they provoked. On the 15th of August, the whole family was exterminated overnight. None of the 105 people of the Yi family survived. Even the babies in swaddling clothes were crushed to death. It's almost the 15th of August. The unsettled case of the Yi family, which lasted for 13 years, became 14 years, but there is still no clue. I really don't know why Ling Qinglan is so persistent. Su Qingtan sighed. There were thousands of unsettled cases in the Supreme Judiciary. However, Brother Ling didn't investigate other cases. Instead, he had to investigate a case which happened so long ago. Wasn't he asking for a snub? Su Li heard it and said with a smile, "Maybe Lord Ling is related to this family. Only a case related to himself will make him so persistent." Su Qingtan couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. "The people of the Yi family have died long ago. Ling Qinglan is the posthumous son of General Ling Feihe. How could he be related to the Yi family? I heard from the people of the Supreme Judiciary that he was humiliated because of this case. He didn't deserve the title of the first person in the Supreme Judiciary. So, he worked hard. But in my opinion, Brother Ling shouldn't be so naive." "I see." Su Li responded. Her eyes were shining. She seemed to think of something. At this moment, in the Ling mansion, Ling Qinglan rarely came here. Both Mrs. Gu and Qiu Meng were very happy. They quickly ordered people to prepare wine and dishes. "Qinglan, you haven't come here for a long time." Mrs. Gu picked a whole bowl of dishes for Ling Qinglan and blamed him. "Why do you live outside? Your parents died early. Why don't you live here? Your brother Ping is not at home all the year round. Ling Li is a little bastard. I need someone to show filial piety to me." Ling Qinglan's face rippled with a touch of warmth. He said with a smile, "Grandma, I am used to living in the Supreme Judiciary. I miss you, so I come to see you. Sometimes you are more cunning than your brother Li. I just don't know." Chapter 153. It was very late at night. Mrs. Gu and Xiao Meng went to bed one after another without eating much. Ling Qinglan temporarily rested in the Ling mansion tonight. When the servants went to bed, he immediately got up and came to Ling Li's courtyard. At this moment, the light was still on in the study of Ling Li's courtyard. Looking at the yellow light, Ling Qinglan smiled and pushed the door in. What a rare guest, Ling Qinglan. More than half a year has passed. You finally remember that you are a member of the Ima cult? Ling Li reclined on the wheelchair and said with a faint smile. Ling Qinglan's expression remained unchanged. He sat opposite Ling Li at the table and said seriously, although I didn't come, the news of the Tianya house has never stopped. I never forget my duty. Ling Xian came in at this time and poured a cup of hot tea for Ling Qinglan. Warm yourself up. It's late at night. I am your nominal cousin anyway. I should care about you. Ling Li waved his hand. Ling Qinglan couldn't help but smile and said, you are still the same. No matter what is going on outside, you look indifferent. Then he picked up the tea and put it to his mouth. Ling Li said untimely, you are still the same. You don't say anything when there is something wrong with the cold poison. You also let Su Qingtan take over the pending case of the Yi family. Do you really think that you can hide the news from me because you are the owner of the Tianya house? Ling Qinglan stopped and was silent for a moment. Finally, he took a sip of tea and raised his head to say seriously, I don't escape. I just accept the fact calmly. I also want to find the enemy who destroyed the Yi family by myself. However, God doesn't open his eyes. I can only entrust it to others. Su Qingtan is very smart. Although he can't take over the position of Qinghu, he can continue to help me investigate cases in the Supreme Judiciary. Ling Li sighed softly and said, if you said so 1 year ago, I would definitely agree with you. I would definitely agree with your method, but now, no. You have to help me get the full moon sword. How can you leave it alone? During this time, even if you want to vomit blood, you have to think of a perfect strategy to get the full moon sword from the wolves and leopards. Anne. Ling Li threw a note to Ling Qinglan. Ling Qinglan took it and opened it. A strangely shaped branch was drawn on it, and the word, Ku Rong, was attached next to it. Activate all the power of the Tianya house and find this branch at all costs. Then, your task will be completed. After hearing that, Ling Qinglan was expressionless. After a long time, he stood up and nodded slightly, I know. You saved me once. I will help you fulfill these 2 requirements. Ling Li smiled evilly and stared at Ling Qinglan, who was calm. He suddenly asked, Emo, what am I to you? Ling Qinglan's eyes changed, and he finally became serious. He hadn't heard of this name for 13 years. Sure enough, after a long time, everything would become unfamiliar. For Ling Li, he was disdainful and disgusted at first. Then, when he found out about his true identity, he was astonished and in awe. After Ling Li found a way to help him break through the inborn hurdle and save his life, he was grateful. Finally, when he learned that he still couldn't escape the fate, he became indifferent. Who was Ling Li to him? He really didn't think about it. The study became quieter and quieter. It seemed that Ling Li's question was difficult to answer. Ling Qinglan was silent for a long time and finally couldn't give an answer. Give me time, and I will give you the answer. After saying that, Ling Qinglan left without looking back. Ling Xian couldn't bear it and whispered, Master, don't you tell him? If. Ling Li held his chin with one hand and smiled, if I can't even trust this guy, I can't be the hierarch of the Yinma cult. The next day, Su Li went out early in the morning, but she didn't go to the National Academy. The people arranged by Ling Li to protect her secretly followed her, and suddenly found that they were lost. What's the matter? A young man dressed as a peddler was confused. He didn't see an ordinary woman in coarse linen pass by him. The people of Shalu cult practiced the same practice method. Su Li could see at a glance that the people who had been protecting her secretly were from Shalu cult, so she didn't drive them away. If they were others, she would have killed them. Today, she didn't go to the National Academy. Yesterday, when she read in Su Qingtan's study, she suddenly realized that the plan to be implemented later had to be carried out in advance. The forces in Yunjing City were complicated. The structure was not as simple as that in the Qinghe town. She could know the general situation after a little exploration. In Yunjing City, if there were no spies and spies, she would be like a blind person and couldn't grasp the situation at all. Just like now, she had no way to know how many people of the Lianxue cult, the Hehuan sect and other forces entered the city. So, she went to the Hongyan house today. Passing by a clothes shop, Su Li had become a handsome child and walked to the lane of brothels. There were few rich childs who came to drink in the lane of brothels during the day. It was even rarer to see a good-looking child like Su Li. As soon as she appeared, many prostitutes waved their handkerchiefs at the window. "Master, come and play, child, I am very powerful. I promise that you will be comfortable, master." Su Li smiled, but she never looked at those prostitutes. She went straight to the Hongyan house with the best position. Those prostitutes stamped their feet when they saw her. She went to see Chu Fox again. These men are really good. As soon as Su Li entered the Hongyan house, the procuress, whose face was painted red and white, greeted him with a smile. She said, "Child, you look strange. I am afraid that it is the first time for you to come to our Hongyan house. Do you want me to introduce you to the girls in the Hongyan house?" Su Li retreated a few steps without leaving a trace and said with a warm smile, "I heard that Miss Chu Lu of your Hongyan house is excellent at playing the zither. I came here because of your reputation. Mom, I hope you can arrange it for me." When the procuress heard that, her eyes lit up. She gently patted Su Li's shoulder and winked at her. "Oh. She is the most popular girl in our Hongyan house. The price?" Su Li still smiled and said, "Mom, just tell me." Hearing that, the procuress immediately went upstairs and shouted, "Lu, welcome the guest. A child wants to listen to your zither. He is a rare elegant guest." "Got it, Mom. I will prepare now. Please wait for a moment." A soft voice came from upstairs. It was so soft that it could melt one's bones. Many playboys who were drinking in the Hongyan house during the day couldn't help but feel excited. Su Li was full of jealousy and hatred. Chu Lu, the bitch, not only cared about money but also appearance. She was really picky. Someone like him, who was poor and ugly, had no chance at all. Su Li showed good self-restraint. She sat downstairs and didn't look at other prostitutes. After a while, a good-looking maid came downstairs and invited Su Li to go upstairs. Su Li thanked her and went upstairs. The little maid's eyes were full of stars. She wished she could be a miss to serve this child. Su Li went to the door and gently knocked on the door. A fresh and elegant voice came from the door, which was completely different from the soft voice before. "Child, you are really elegant. I, Chu Lu, should play a song for you. Please come in." Su Li smiled and opened the door. A faint fragrance came into her nose. What she saw was a very elegantly decorated room. It seemed that the person living here was a scholar, not a prostitute. The maid quietly closed the door. Su Li walked inside and finally saw Chu Lu sitting in front of the zither. When Chu Lu saw Su Li's handsome face, she couldn't help but be surprised. She loosened her hands from the strings and said, "It's hard to believe that such an elegant and extraordinary person like you is willing to come to the brothel to play a song for Chu Lu." Su Li sat down with the help of the table and faced Chu Lu. She chuckled and said, "It's hard for me to believe that such a beautiful girl like Chu Lu would give herself up here." Hearing that, Chu Lu's beautiful face was full of sadness. She said, "I'm a good girl, but I was raped by villains. That's my fate. I fought back, but I couldn't defeat them." After hearing that, Su Li smiled more and stroked the invisible air with her right hand. It seemed that she was intoxicated with something. Chu Lu was confused. But Su Li suddenly said, the heart-melting powder of the Hehuan sect is really powerful. Even I almost let down my vigilance and tell you my origin. As soon as Su Li said that, Chu Lu's face suddenly changed. She looked fierce and didn't have the sadness of a weak girl. She stroked the surface of the zither with one hand and stared at Su Li's face coldly. She said, "Who are you?" Clang! 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 Su Li gently clapped her hands. The strings in Chu Lu's hands were broken and couldn't make any sound. Her weapon was destroyed. Her face was completely pale. The person who came was extremely powerful. She couldn't defeat her at all. Chu Lu of the Hehuan sect. You are in charge of the intelligence agency in Yunjing City. The Hong Yen house is actually under your control. Am I right? Su Li narrowed her eyes and said faintly. Chu Lu seemed to give up resistance. She sighed and said, since you are prepared, why do you ask? When they were talking, the fragrance in the room was much stronger. Chu Lu stared at the change of Su Li. But she saw that Su Li looked as usual and was not affected at all. How was it possible? Chu Lu was really panicked this time. When did the knockout drug given by the Hehuan sect become so useless? Since I am prepared, how can I not guard against the famous hallucination powder of the Hehuan sect? Su Li stood up and walked to Chu Lu. She said with a smile, you have been in Yunjing for several years. Why are you still so immature? Chu Lu took a deep breath and calmed down reluctantly. She said, since you are not in a hurry to kill me, you must have something important to discuss with me. Why do you hide it? Just say it. Miss Chu, you are so bold. Su Li praised and sat down again. She said, I also know that you joined the Hehuan sect because you had no choice. You were even forced to come to Yunjing City by the sect. The Hong Yen powder in your body is warning you all the time that your life is not in your hands, right? Chu Lu looked dull and said, it turns out that you are a disciple of the same sect. In this case, why do you test me? I have already accepted my fate. What she said to deceive Su Li just now was false, but the latter half was true. She was still no match for the giant Hehuan sect after all. No, when did I say that I am the dregs of the Hehuan sect? Su Li looked disgusted and said, Miss Chu, don't compare me with those sluts. It is disgusting. Not from the Hehuan sect. Chu Lu's dull expression changed a little, and then she was deeply shocked. Su Li was not from the Hehuan sect, but she knew so many secrets of the Hehuan sect. Every sect has moles from other forces. Miss Chu, you don't need to be surprised. Seeing that she had completely shocked Chu Lu, Su Li finally stopped teasing and said seriously, I don't know if Miss Chu is interested in making a deal with me. Chu Lu's heart shrank. She knew that it was the main topic. What deal? Su Li showed a finger and smiled brightly. She said, the first one is that I can borrow your intelligence agency in Yunjing City. Correspondingly, I will give you the antidote of the Hong Yen powder so that you will no longer be controlled by the Hehuan sect. What about the second one? Chu Lu was a little excited, but she didn't agree. Chapter 154. You flatter me, young master. I just have some self-awareness. Chu Lu smiled lightly. Even if she used the arrangement of the Hehuan sect in Yunjing City to exchange the antidote of the Hongqian powder from Su Li, how could she escape from the Hehuan sect with the cultivation of the acquired hurdle? If she really agreed, she would definitely die. The second way of cooperation is that you, Chu Lu, become my woman. Su Li saw Chu Lu's expression changed slightly. She couldn't help but smile and said, Miss Chu, don't get me wrong. I don't have any improper thoughts about you. I want to say that if you are willing to betray the Hehuan sect and join the force I belong to, as long as you do your part, I will definitely let you escape unscathed. Escape unscathed? Chu Lu's eyes flashed with sarcasm. How? And how do I know that I just got out of the wolf's den and into the tiger's mouth? Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows and said, "Would you rather be shackled by the Hengqian powder all your life and let others control your life than try my proposal?" Chu Lu's delicate body shook slightly. She struggled and said with difficulty, "Who would like to be a puppet that can't be free in life and death? But you come here strangely. If you don't tell me the reason, I'm afraid that I can't be moved." Su Li sat cross-legged in front of Chu Lu and said calmly, "In terms of force, the Hehuan sect, which is a 9th-grade sect, is not as powerful as the Hehuan sect. But in terms of the skills of hiding people, the Hehuan sect is not as good as me." Just like this. While speaking, Su Li's appearance changed into another ordinary face at a speed visible to the naked eye. If she hadn't changed her clothes, Chu Lu wouldn't have known that they were the same person. "You?" Chu Lu was shocked. This was a high-level disguise method. If she could master a little bit of it, she could completely change her identity after the Hengqian powder was cured. Even if she stayed in Yunjing City, the people of the Hehuan sect couldn't find her. For a moment, Chu Lu was tempted. Not everyone can learn a high-grade disguise technique to a profound level. "I'm sure you're clear about this, Mississippi. However, I still have a secret method that is easier to practice. As long as Miss shows enough value, I will personally return with the disguise method and the antidote for the Hengqian powder. What do you think?" Speaking of this, Chu Lu's eyes were fixed and she had made a decision. "What do I need to do?" Hearing that, Su Li finally smiled happily. An hour later, Su Li waved a folding fan and left the Heng Yen house leisurely. Chu Lu, who was on the second floor, opened the window and watched Su Li go away. Her eyes were full of complex feelings. She knew very well that after today, she would dance on the edge of a knife. If she was careless, she would be cut into pieces. Walking out of the alley of brothels, Su Li took a deep breath and felt quite relaxed. With Chu Lu as the supervisor, it was much easier for the Linli building to develop. Seeing that it was still early, Su Li took a fancy to a clothing store. When she was about to go there, she suddenly heard an old voice coming from the street behind her. "Divination. Point out the right path. Those who are fated will not take a single cent. Child, you are fated to be mine. Why don't you come and have a divination?" Su Li's expression changed slightly. Following the voice, she saw a ragged beggar sitting on the ground with his legs crossed. There was a broken bowl in front of him. There were not many copper coins in it. If there was not a piece of cloth next to the broken bowl that said, "Divination," she would have thought it was a beggar. Seeing Su Li coming and going, the beggar's eyes suddenly brightened. He immediately continued to say, "If the divination doesn't work, it's free. I am proficient in yin and yang and the 5 elements. People call me the 10 divinations and 9 spirits. It's not an exaggeration." Su Li shook her head slightly and turned around to leave. For a moment, she felt that the old beggar was a superior. Seeing this, the old beggar was immediately anxious. He immediately used his black chicken claws to calculate in a dignified manner and murmured. Listening carefully, it turned out that he was saying, "Heaven and earth, I am the best at fortune-telling in the human world." Maybe it was God's blessing. After the old beggar calculated for less than 3 breaths, it seemed that he really calculated something. His eyes brightened and he shouted, "Child, please wait. What I said is true. Your fate is strange. It seems that you have experienced 2 lives. It's extremely strange." Crack. When the second half of the sentence was said, Su Li's indifferent face instantly became stiff and she stopped. A random old beggar on the street could tell that she was a reincarnated body. Being shocked, Su Li slowly turned around. Her dignified expression disappeared in the blink of an eye and turned into strong interest. She turned around and came to the old beggar. She handed out a note of 100 taels of silver and said with a smile, 2 lives. I have never heard of such a saying. You are a bit interesting as a fortune-teller. I happen to have some time today. You can help me to have a divination. When the passers-by saw this scene, they couldn't help but shake their heads. The old beggar was a famous liar in Yunjing City. None of what he said was true. Unexpectedly, someone was fooled. When the old beggar saw the banknote of 100 taels of silver, his two turbid eyes immediately burst out a strong light. Suli didn't see clearly how his two claws moved, and the banknote in her hand was stuffed into his arms. The old beggar loved money so much, Suli felt strange. For a moment, she wondered if the old beggar guessed it. But what he said before was not like a wild guess. The old beggar rubbed his hands and asked Suli to spread out her palm. He took out 3 dirty copper coins from his arms and put them on her palm. Then he put his palms together and muttered some nonsense that Suli couldn't understand. Then he devoutly took the copper coins from Suli's hand one by one. Suli didn't know whether it was an illusion or not. She seemed to feel that the color of the 3 copper coins seemed to be a little darker. The old beggar took the copper coins and threw them into the sky. At the same time, he shouted softly. This time, Suli finally heard what he said. Reincarnation of heaven and earth, the seal appears. Ding! 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 The 3 copper coins seemed to be pulled by an invisible force. They fell to the ground at a very fast speed and made a tinkling sound. Suli's eyes changed and stared at the old beggar. This person really had some real skills. When the copper coins fell, the old beggar stretched his head to look. His face changed greatly and he spat out a big mouthful of blood. Suli's heart shrank. She thought that the old beggar would say something amazing again. But the old beggar said bitterly, "What a loss. My blood is more than 100 taels." Suli narrowed her eyes and stood up to leave. Seeing that the situation was not good, the old beggar got up and grabbed Suli's ankle. He said repeatedly, "Hey! Child, child. I'm just kidding. I'll explain it for you." Suli stopped and sat down again. The old beggar shook his head and lamented, "People's hearts are not what they used to be. Nowadays, it's really more and more difficult to do business. Child, your sign is clearly the evil of the evil and the evil of the evil. Since ancient times, evil has never prevailed over good. Those who have this sign are bound to have bad luck and a miserable end. But child is not so," the old beggar said with doubts on his face. He pointed to a very inconspicuous broken character on the copper coins. "You should have a doomed test 1.5 years ago. You will definitely die. But now you are standing in front of me alive, which is really puzzling. As the saying goes, one who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune later. Maybe because of the doomed test, child's birth destiny has changed and there is a trace of vitality in the vast deathly air." Suli was silent all the time. 1.5 years ago, it was the day when she was reborn. The doomed test mostly referred to the death of the previous life. The old beggar's divination was so accurate that it scared her. Speaking of it, this is the second time that I have met a person with this divination. The old beggar seemed to recall an unpleasant memory. He gnashed his teeth and said, "That is the first playboy in Yunjing. I just said a few words, and I was almost killed by him. It's really hateful." Suli's eyes flashed when she heard that. Ling Li. His origin was indeed somewhat unclear, and most of the things he taught her were not from the Dehan country. However, even if she went to the spiritual circle, which was a higher level in the previous life, she did not see anything related to Ling Li. Ling Li's hometown was more distant than the spiritual circle. Thinking of this, Suli smiled and asked, "Old master, I really don't believe your alarmist talk. However, if it is really as you said, how can we solve the problem?" The old beggar coughed slightly and twisted his hands. His meaning was self-evident. Suli stood up slowly. The old beggar panicked again and immediately explained, "Divination is divination, and interpretation of the lots is interpretation. This is the rule. Even if young master is fated to meet me, you should at least give me some compensation, shouldn't you?" Suli was silent for a moment. Finally, she squatted down and took out a banknote. This time, it was 1,000 taels. The old beggar's eyes were even brighter. He grabbed the banknote and murmured, "You are much more generous than Ling Li." Su Li was stunned. Didn't he just say that Ling Li didn't believe it? How could he let him interpret the lots? It seemed that the old guy hid something. After the old beggar took the money, he picked up the black copper coin and scraped off the dirt on it with his fingertips. Then he poured it into the inkstone he took out from his arms and ground it to melt completely. Then he took out a writing brush from nowhere and dipped it in the ink. He said to Su Li, "Stretch out your hand. This is my treasure. I didn't even take it out to draw runes for the little bastard of the Ling family." The implication was that he did it for the sake of the silver. Su Li hesitated for a moment, and finally reached out her hand, showing her white wrist. The old beggar couldn't help but murmur, "Your wrist is more tender than that of a silly girl." Su Li's face darkened. Before she spoke, she saw the old beggar holding the writing brush and drawing a circle on Su Li's wrist unskillfully. It was extremely ugly and didn't look like a rune at all. The old beggar didn't seem to be satisfied. He muttered to a circle of extremely ugly ink marks for a moment. Then he drew another circle, which merged with the previous black circle and became darker and thicker. Did the old guy deliberately make fun of him? Chapter 155. Whoosh! A stinging pain suddenly rose from her wrist. In Su Li's horrified eyes, the black circle drawn by the old beggar suddenly emitted bursts of white smoke. The black gradually faded, and the white smoke condensed into a strange pattern. It trembled like a living thing, and finally drilled into Su Li's skin through her pores. Su Li only felt that there seemed to be something on her wrist, but this feeling only lasted for a moment and then disappeared. No matter how she probed, she couldn't detect it. After such a change, the black ink on her wrist disappeared out of thin air, as if it had never appeared. "What did you do to me?" Su Li looked at the pedestrians on the street coldly, but she saw that they passed by and didn't look at her. It seemed that the world where she and the old beggar lived was completely separated. She shook her wrist, and the dagger immediately fell into her hand. The tip of the dagger immediately glowed with moon-white light. Seeing this, the old beggar showed an aggrieved expression. "Child, you are so unreasonable. I spent my cultivation to draw a rune for you. But you not only don't shed tears of gratitude, but also fight against me?" This really bitterly disappointed this old man's heart. Whoosh! There was a sound of breaking through the air. Before the old beggar finished his words, Su Li's dagger had been put against his neck, and her voice gradually became cold. "I have never seen such a weird rune. Since you have deceived me into being cursed by this rune, why not tell me the truth and tell me the function of the rune?" The old beggar squinted his turbid eyes and glanced at the glittering dagger. He sighed sadly. "People are really unscrupulous. I don't know you, so how can I hurt you? Although the rune I drew for you can't completely avoid bad luck, it can bring you a glimmer of hope. You put the dagger against my neck, tut-tut." Su Li's expression was slightly relaxed, and she put down the dagger, not because what he said was reasonable, but because she had been cursed by the rune. Even if she killed the old beggar, it would not help. If the rune was really harmful to her, the old beggar should have shown off long ago. She didn't have the ability to isolate the world. This person's cultivation was far higher than hers, but she didn't know why he didn't show it. "I hope you're telling the truth. Otherwise, I won't let go of anyone who harbors ill intentions towards me," Su Li said in a deep voice. The old beggar waved his hand indifferently. "Go away, go away. It's not easy for me to tell someone's fortune, but it's full of ungrateful people. Sure enough, the world is fake, and people can't be counted." Su Li frowned. The old beggar said something she didn't understand. She didn't want to ask again, so she turned and left. She had just taken 3 steps when she suddenly felt something strange behind her. She quickly looked back, and her pupils instantly shrank. The old beggar was not on the ground, and even the stall was gone. And she thought. Su. Or, Is he still here? But I can't see him. Thinking of this, Su Li's eyes were full of fear. She subconsciously went away. She didn't want to have anything to do with this person. She would forget what happened today because she was confused for a moment. And of Su of Li, and. Of the, and, of. Today is a good day, hey. Seeing Su Li leave, the old beggar packed up his bedding and left. He held the banknotes tightly in his hand, and a touch of sarcasm flashed through his turbid eyes. He said, "It's not smooth to use a fake thing." At this moment, in the branch of the Linli building in Yunjing City, Chu Qingning obediently sat in the temporary shed and innocently looked at Fang Yuan and Yin Xuedong next to the table. He looked as if he had constipation and was very embarrassed. "What's going on? If you don't say anything, I'm going to ignore you." Yin Xuedong was slightly annoyed, and her eyes were full of killing intent. Did the fool find another woman in Yunjing City? "Qingning, if you don't tell us, we can't help you either." Fang Yuan frowned and said strangely, "You suddenly stop building the underground adytum. Aren't you afraid that Su Li will blame you?" Since it was convenient for the poisonous heart-biting insect to dig the mountain, the construction of the underground adytum of the Linli building in Yunjing City was naturally handed over to Chu Qingning. Hearing Fang Yuan's words, Chu Qingning's face became paler. He rubbed his hands and showed a smile that was uglier than crying. "Su Li told us to be careful and not to be discovered by the neighbor. Well, I seem to, accidentally, dig through." Yin Xuedong was stunned at first, and then she opened her almond-shaped eyes widely and said, "What did you say?" But Fang Yuan had already rushed to the underground passage. At night, Su Li received the urgent news and rushed to the end of the underground passage. She saw a wall made of black iron suddenly appear in the land. The iron wall should be as smooth as a mirror, but now it was full of potholes as if it had been bitten by a dog. One of the potholes was particularly deep, and it was almost penetrated by a thin film. Through the thin film, Fang Yuan and others could almost feel the light from the other side of the iron wall. Su Li raised her eyebrows and glanced at Chu Qingning, who stood aside like a little wife and didn't speak. She didn't say anything and waved her hand to let everyone return to the temporary shed. "That is to say, you were sleeping at that time, and the poisonous heart-biting insect operated on its own." The iron wall suddenly appeared, and it ate it directly as if it were mud and stones. "You didn't realize it until it sent a message of indigestion and woke you up," Su Li briefly summarized. Chu Qingning smiled embarrassedly and hid behind Yin Xuedong without a trace. Then he nodded gently. Su Li didn't say anything, but Yin Xuedong was the first to laugh out of anger. "Wow. Chu Qingning, you should sleep late behind our back. Do you know that if this wall is dug through, we are likely to face the anger of 2 unborn seniors?" Chu Qingning shook his body and was full of guilt. He was about to cry. I didn't mean it. If you meant it, you would have been dead," Su Li said lightly, which scared Chu Qingning instantly. He lowered his head and said dejectedly, "I am willing to accept any punishment." Since Su Li said that the winery next door had an extraordinary origin, we should have thought that they would also build an adytum underground. Yin Xuedong said with some annoyance. She regretted that she didn't remind Chu Qingning in time. They are really rich and overbearing to build a wall with black iron. In the outside world, weapons cast with black iron are hard currency and extremely valuable. Su Li shook her head and explained, "There is another function of black iron. As long as it reaches a certain thickness, it can isolate the psychic awareness of the inborn warriors. Now the wall is useless because of Chu Qingning's torment." Fang Yuan's eyes were slightly fixed. "Does it mean that you can see what is in that adytum?" Su Li glanced at Fang Yuan and said, "The cultivation of those two is much higher than mine. If I really explore it with my psychic awareness, they will come to us for tea in the next moment." Fang Yuan was scared after hearing that, and a cold sweat appeared on his forehead instantly. He was about to break through to the inborn realm. He originally wanted to explore it after the breakthrough, but fortunately, Su Li had reminded him earlier. Noticing that Fang Yuan's pneuma was unstable, Su Li was surprised and said, "The movement of breaking through to the inborn realm is too big. Remember to find a desolate place outside the city and let Qingning and Xuedong protect you." Being exposed by Su Li, Fang Yuan's face was slightly red and he felt a little lost. He originally wanted to give her a surprise. Su Li smiled and handed over the AO sword skills. In fact, she didn't have much hope. Unexpectedly, Fang Yuan had a good talent and was about to break through to the inborn realm before the age of 18. It was really a surprise. After laughing, Su Li looked at Chu Qingning and said in a faint tone, "I will fill the iron wall with something. You don't have to worry about it. Chu Qingning, you will not sleep for 3 days and 3 nights to complete the construction of the underground adytum. If there is any mistake, I have a good job. I am worried that no one will do it." Chu Qingning trembled when he heard that. He immediately promised that he would not make any mistake even if he didn't sleep for 7 days and 7 nights. Fang Yuan's heart sank when he heard that. What good job? Chu Qingning didn't do it. It seemed that Su Li didn't want them to do it. Was she going to do it herself? Su Li heard that and smiled gently. She told them to speed up the construction of the Linli building. Then she left in the night. There was a so-called good job. But now Chu Lu was here. Of course, she had to make the best use of her. It was more suitable to let the people in the business do the troublesome work. In the Hongyan house, Chu Lu received the first order from Su Li. She felt strange and said, "How can I follow her? If I follow Su Li, it is reasonable. But Su Zipei, who is she?" In the next few days, an extremely strange scene appeared in a remote winery alley in Yunjing City. There were only 3 to 5 small taverns and inns on this street, but there were 2 shops that were right next to each other. One of them was in a dilapidated state, and its business was bleak, while the other was still busy building a 2-story building. The materials used were all of the best quality, and just looking at the wood alone, it was worth at least 100,000 taels of silver. Is there something wrong with the owner's head? Our business is so bad. Why does he still build a shop here? A woman dressed in a rural dress walked out of the kitchen with a kitchen knife. She looked at the tall building which was several times higher than their winery and couldn't help shouting. Not long after, a middle-aged scholar walked out of the front room. He was dressed in a gray robe and had an unkempt beard. He looked like a down-and-out scholar who had failed in his examinations. His skinny figure was in stark contrast to the woman's stocky build. The shabby scholar glanced at the tall building. He cursed with jealousy, "What a waste of money. It is better to spend the money." When the strong woman heard that, she immediately walked over and grabbed the shabby scholar's ear. She opened her mouth and shouted, "Who are you scolding? Who are you scolding? Do you dislike me for giving too little pocket money? Or do you miss Yan Yan of the Qinghong house? Well, you bastard. You learned to scold the locust indirectly after only a few years of study. It hurts. My wife, I really didn't think about it. Let go, ah ah ah. My ear is going to fall off." Chapter 156. Chu Qingning heard the scolding coming from next door and couldn't help but dig his ears. If he didn't see this black iron wall, he would not believe that the extremely vulgar couple would be superior and born seniors. Is this the so-called great seclusion in the world? I admit my inferiority. Chu Qingning sighed. He closed his eyes and continued to control the poisonous heart-biting insect to dig the earth. His pious expression was no less than that of the excavators from Lanxiang. Su Li meditated for a few days and finally finished studying the remaining pages of the secret medicine of the Hehuan sect. When she reached such a realm in the poison circle, the so-called secret medicine of the sect was just a lock with a cloud of suspicion. Now she had both the key and the lock, so she could see through it at a glance. It wouldn't take too long to develop the antidote of the Hongqian powder. As for the poison in Tang Lei's body, it would not take effect for a while, and it was not the time to detoxify it. The development of the antidote was not urgent. On this day, in the Su house, Su Li got up early in the morning and hadn't gone out yet. Suddenly, Mammy Li appeared at the door with 2 red invitations, trembling with fear. "Miss, something bad has happened." Su Li raised her eyebrows and sat down again. She gave up the idea of going to the affiliated school and took the 2 invitations to open. The first one was from the first prince's residence. The second photo was of the third prince's residence. "I have long heard that Miss Su is beautiful and talented. I have admired you for a long time, so I specially set up a banquet in the Hongyan house. Miss Su, please do me a favor and come to meet me at the Su hour of the first day of the 8th lunar month. I will definitely prepare for you." Putting the invitation on the table, Su Li thought for a while. These 2 invitations, except for the location, seemed to be carved from the same mold. If she really wanted to attend the banquet, she could only choose one of them. The emperor was already old, but the position of crown prince had not yet been established, so the inheritance war was inevitable. The first prince and the third prince were obviously against each other. Both sides were sparing no effort to win over their forces. Standing behind her was the emperor's preceptor Qi Xianqing, who could speak in front of the emperor. Naturally, she was regarded as a delicious cake to win over. "Miss, this is the first prince and the third prince. If we make them unhappy..." Mammy Li was frightened and worried about Su Li. This step was too difficult. No matter who she chose, she would offend someone. But if she chose neither, she would offend both sides. "Nanny, don't worry. I know what I'm doing." Su Li smiled slightly. She was not surprised that she was suddenly in trouble. In the previous life, she heard later that the 2 princes also competed with each other, but neither of them became the emperor, which was quite ridiculous. Putting down the invitation, Su Li went out as usual and didn't mean to reply to any prince. Mammy Li was full of doubts. She waited anxiously for a day, but no one from the prince's mansion came to question her. It seemed that no one was convinced and they were sure that Su Li would go there on the first day of August. The hostility between the 2 princes' residences became more and more obvious. In this strange atmosphere, the first day of August finally arrived. Su Li was dressed in a feather blue embroidered brocade dress. A jasper hairpin was inserted into her black hair bun. Her delicate face was slightly powdered and she was about to go out. Su Qingtan knocked at the door and came in. When he saw the second sister's dress, his eyes flashed with amazement, but instantly became worried. He asked in a deep voice, "You really don't want me to go with you to the banquet tonight?" He understood that Su Li was invited because of Qi Xianqing. If she refused the prince, it was hard to imagine whether the anger of the former would directly swallow Su Li. He remembered that he was fortunate to have Qi Xianqing as a banner to block countless playboys for Su Li before. He didn't expect that she would be involved in the dangerous battle for the throne. It was really Qi Xianqing's fault and success. Su Li came with a peaceful smile and gently straightened Su Qingtan's slightly uneven clothes. Her gentle voice had a convincing power. "Eldest brother, don't worry. I will have a good sense of propriety. Besides, the decision is not up to me, but up to the master. I believe that as long as I say so, the princes will not embarrass me." Su Qingtan felt a little better. He forced a smile and said, "I hope so. Then I'm leaving. Be careful on the way." Seeing Su Li's carriage leave, Su Qingtan's face was tense. He clenched his fists hidden in his sleeves. He was still too weak. If he had enough power and strength, why did he force his second sister, a 16-year-old girl, to face the oppression of the princes? You can't protect your sister with your current identity. When you think clearly one day, you will understand what I mean. I expect you to take the initiative to come to me instead of passively accepting it. Thinking of Ling Qinglan's words, Su Qingtan gritted his teeth. At this moment, his eyes were extremely firm. In the alley of brothels, the river behind the Hongyan house was sparkling. A well-lit exquisite ship with several decks was floating on the river. A long wooden board was set up at the bridgehead and extended to the shore. Under the new moon, the breeze was blowing. It was elegant and chic. Lady Chu, I really owe you a favor today. The first prince, Dong Fangsheng, came early. He booked the entire Hongyan house tonight. But he thought it was inappropriate to entertain a girl in the Hongyan house. Chu Lu came up with the idea of boating on the river and solved the problem for him. Chu Lu covered her face and smiled coquettishly. She said, Your Highness, you are so polite. It is my duty to share your worries and difficulties. Please don't forget the help of the Hehuan sect after you ascend the throne. Dong Fangsheng's mouth was dry and his throat rolled. He secretly cursed that the women of Hehuan's sect were really vixens, but he still maintained the image of a gentleman and nodded with a smile. Of course, it is. It's almost time. Miss Chu, please sit down. Then, he pointed to the gauze curtain at the stern. There was a guqin behind the gauze curtain. He would feel much better if there was a gauze curtain. Chu Lu was surprised. The first prince could resist the temptation of the Hehuan powder. She underestimated him. With his patience, he might be able to do it. The task assigned by the sect was completed. Chu Lu quietly dispersed the Hehuan powder. She got up and walked into the gauze curtain. Dong Fangsheng felt much better. He was a little relieved and waited carefully. He didn't know much about the martial arts circle, so he didn't notice the difference just now. In a twinkling of an eye, it was 11 o'clock. No one appeared on the riverbank. Even if Dong Fangsheng had some confidence in the chips in his hand, if Su Li didn't come today, how could he perform? For a moment, Dong Fangsheng felt slightly agitated. He couldn't help but loosen the button on his chest and take a breath. But at this moment, on the riverbank full of lanterns, two figures, one in blue and one in white, suddenly appeared. The blue figure was Su Li. Dong Fangsheng was shocked. But when he saw the face of the white figure beside Su Li, his eyes immediately widened. Why? Why did this guy appear here? Ling Li pushed the wheelchair by himself and quickly entered the ship. His speed was even faster than Su Li's. Seeing Dong Fangsheng's dull face, he immediately laughed. He patted Dong Fangsheng's stiff shoulder very warmly and said with a crooked face, I haven't seen you for a long time. Brother Sheng, you are still elegant as before. As soon as I received your invitation, I immediately dressed up and rushed over without stopping. How about it? My clothes aren't a disgrace to you, right? Looking at Ling Li's extremely attentive face, Dong Fangsheng's face instantly became darker than the bottom of a pot. He didn't believe that the little bastard who dared to put aphrodisiac in his wine a year ago suddenly became sensible today. He looked down and saw Ling Li's wrinkled clothes. His mouth twitched violently. The little bastard wore the same clothes as him. Looking at Ling Li's wrinkled clothes, the first prince, who was very satisfied with his clothes, suddenly had a feeling of vomiting. This guy really came to undermine him. But he could only bite the bullet today. Because, he did give the invitation to the Ling family. At this moment, Su Li had already walked to the ship. Looking at Ling Li who was complacent and the first prince who was angry, she couldn't help but feel strange. Why did he also come back? Seeing Su Li coming in, the first prince was confused. Dong Fangsheng instantly felt that his face was ruthlessly pulled off by Ling Li and rubbed on the ground. But at this moment, he still had to keep a smile and bear his anger. He said to Su Li, It's my honor that Miss Su is willing to come here. Please sit for a moment and let me deal with the unexpected situation. Su Li showed a considerate smile and nodded slightly. First prince, it's very convenient. Then she really sat aside and watched the play. Dong Fangsheng was relieved. He was really afraid that Su Li would be annoyed by Ling Li and leave directly. In that case, his impression in front of his father would be worse than that of the third brother. It should be known that a slight difference could lead to a great difference. Suddenly, Dong Fangsheng felt his body turn cold, as if a terrifying chill had locked onto him, causing him to tremble uncontrollably. But this feeling came and went quickly. He didn't find the source at all. Dong Fangsheng glanced at Ling Li, who was still giggling. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. For a moment, he thought that the source was Ling Li. Today, he was really confused because of anger. Even if the sun rose from the west, it couldn't be this little bastard. Ho ho, Dong Fangsheng sat next to Ling Li's wheelchair. He suppressed his anger and said with a smile, "Brother Ling Li, I remember that the invitation was clearly written to your cousin, Ling Qinglan. Why did you come?" "Yes." Ling Li took it for granted and replied without hesitation, "Brother Sheng, you and third brother Lang should discuss the date and send invitations to my cousin at the same time. Qinglan is too busy to attend to other things." "How can he be busy?" "Qinglan went to the banquet of third brother Lang. I am afraid that you will be unhappy, so I come here." "I am afraid that you will be unhappy." When Su Li heard this, she almost burst into laughter. She probably understood. Ling Qinglan belonged to the third prince's faction on the surface. The third prince sent an invitation to Ling Qinglan to discuss important matters. Dong Fangsheng wanted to make trouble, so he deliberately sent an invitation to Ling Qinglan at the same time. The third prince was also angry. He gave Ling Qinglan a taste of his own medicine and also sent an invitation to her. Originally, Ling Qinglan went to the third prince's place and she came to the first prince's place. It seemed that they tied. But Dong Fangsheng forgot that there was a master in the Ling family who didn't know the rules. Chapter 157. Clang, the sound of the zither resolved the awkwardness of the confrontation between the two people. Ling Li followed the sound and saw Chu Lu looming in the gauze curtain. His eyes brightened. He said, "Oh. Isn't this Miss Chu? I only saw Brother Sheng and Miss Su Li just now. I didn't notice that Miss Chu was on the boat. It's my fault." Chu Lu smiled sweetly. Her sweet voice came through the gauze curtain. "Today, I am just a maid playing the zither. Child Ling, don't worry about it. First Prince, the dishes are getting cold. Let's start the banquet first." After being reminded by Chu Lu, Dong Fangsheng suddenly recovered from his anger. He almost forgot that Su Li was still waiting. Dong Fangsheng calmed down and sat down. He said, "Come on, serve the banquet. Since Brother Ling is here, how can I refuse to entertain you?" Immediately, a servant came to the boat and added a banquet table. Ling Li moved the wheelchair to the banquet table. Suddenly, he looked at Su Li, who was sitting on the side, and said with a smile, "Oh, isn't this Miss Su Li, the first talented girl in Yunjing City? Miss Su is really a natural beauty, just like—" "Yes, a fairy descending to the world. Compared with Wu Xiuxiu and other vulgar girls, you are much more beautiful." These words and Ling Li's surprised expression were really funny. Su Li couldn't help giggling. She had never seen Ling Li act like this. Dong Fangsheng was very angry. In his opinion, Su Li was too young to be deceived. She was actually amused by Ling Li. It was he who invited Su Li to talk business, but it became a place for Ling Li to flirt. It made him feel that he was cheated on, but he had no one to complain. Ling Li. Dong Fangsheng couldn't bear it anymore. He shouted loudly, and the whole ship was immediately quiet. Ling Li sneered in his heart, but he pretended to be confused and said, "Brother Sheng, you can call me if you need something. Why do you shout so loudly? It's not good to disturb Miss Su Li." Dong Fangsheng's heart was burning with anger, but he resisted the urge to curse out loud. He put on a fake smile and said, "Brother Ling, your body is suffering from some damage, so you should eat more and talk less. I happen to have something to ask Miss Su Li." "Hi." Ling Li patted the handle of the wheelchair and said, "Brother Sheng, you should have told me earlier. I will stay silent. You can talk, you can talk." Then, Ling Li actually started to eat and drink without caring about anything else. Dong Fangsheng breathed a sigh of relief. There was sweat on his forehead. After he wiped it without a trace, he smiled and praised loudly, Miss Su, you have been famous since the day you entered Yunjing City. Today I can see you. You are really worthy of your reputation. I have no regrets today when I see you. Su Li smiled and showed her white teeth. She opened her red lips and said, First Prince, you are so polite. I know I don't deserve such a great reputation. But my master is too famous. I just benefited from him. Sigh. You can't say that. Dong Fangsheng waved his hand and said, as the saying goes, a great teacher produces a great disciple. The Lord of the Emperor's preceptor can assist my father to ascend the throne. He must have something extraordinary. I have admired the Lord of the Emperor's preceptor for a long time. I wonder if Miss Su Li can introduce him to me. Well, Su Li looked embarrassed. When Dong Fangsheng saw that there was hope, he tried harder to persuade Su Li. Suddenly, a vulgar voice suddenly came in with the momentum of a sudden clap of thunder. Di Shi? I know. Isn't she the most popular girl in the Hongsui building? I remember clearly that I was going to buy her that day. I didn't expect that you got her before me. I was disappointed for a long time. Ling Li held the chicken leg in his right hand and said with a greasy smile. Dong Fangsheng's heart skipped a beat. He looked back and saw that Su Li's face became extremely ugly at a speed visible to the naked eye. No one would feel happy when his master was insulted like this. The sudden disturbance made Dong Fangsheng so angry that he wanted to stab the arrogant and disabled teenager to death. He rushed to Ling Li's table and finally held back his killing intent. He overturned the banquet table with one hand and said angrily, Ling Li, I respect you. Don't go too far. Ling Li tilted his head and picked his ears. He looked sloppy and disdainfully said, Brother Sheng, what are you doing? I'm just telling the truth. Why are you angry with me? If my staying here makes you unhappy, you can just ask me to leave. Why do you have to pretend to treat me to wine and meat? How hypocritical. You. Dong Fangsheng stared and his hands trembled with anger. He underestimated Ling Li's shamelessness. Ling Li was more than shameless. He didn't even know what shame was. It's really unlucky for the Ling family to have a grandson like you. Dong Fangsheng scolded in a roundabout way, but Ling Li nodded calmly and said, I'm flattered. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. I don't want you to say that I go too far. Then, Ling Li turned his wheelchair to leave the ship and went to the shore as if nothing had happened. Dong Fangsheng was so angry that he almost spat out blood. He just wanted to strangle this little bastard. Su Li looked cold, but she still maintained the etiquette. She bowed slightly and said, It's late. First Prince, you'd better go back to the mansion to have a rest. I can't decide the master's affairs. If the master comes to Yunjing one day, I will tell him. I'm leaving now. Please wait. The first prince opened his mouth, but he couldn't say a word in the end. He had completely lost his calm because of Ling Li's disturbance. His mind was in a mess. How could he deal with Su Li's sudden departure calmly? Ling Li. Ling Qinglan, I'm not done with you. Dong Fangsheng roared angrily, but he didn't notice that Su Li and Ling Li disappeared on the shore almost at the same time. Chu Lu came out from behind the gauze curtain and ordered people to clean up the mess of the ship. Then she walked to the first prince and said softly, Your Highness, you are impulsive. Dong Fangsheng exhaled heavily and sighed, Ling Li, the little bastard, went too far. I made a fool of myself in front of Su Li. It's really abominable. Chu Lu was disappointed when she heard that and said, Your Highness, don't you think that Ling Li's sudden appearance tonight may not be a coincidence, but someone deliberately instructed him? Dong Fangsheng was slightly shocked and his eyes changed. He looked back at Chu Lu and said, You mean, Ling Qinglan? Chu Lu spat out 3 words, which immediately made Dong Fangsheng's face pale. Ling Li is an idiot. Of course, he doesn't have such a brain. However, if Ling Qinglan instructed him to make trouble and disturb your dinner with Su Li, it makes sense. It is the nature of a playboy to pester endlessly. Even if Ling Qinglan didn't deliberately teach him, Ling Li could also play well. Maybe, Ling Li is not an idiot as people think. The more Chu Lu said, the gloomier Dong Fangsheng was. Ling Li was a playboy even before his legs were disabled. It was impossible for him to hide his nature when he was in his mother's womb. So, it must be Ling Qinglan who instructed him. Your Highness, please rest assured. Although Su Li refused your kindness, she didn't say anything. She still has a chance. Our Hehuan sect will try our best to help you. It's not a big deal for the third prince. Chu Lu comforted him. The first prince was a little relieved. He made a fist and palm salute and said, "Thank you, Lady Chu. You people in Jianghu pay attention to the code of brotherhood. I can't be an exception. If there is anything I can help, just tell me." Chu Lu's beautiful eyes lit up, but her worry soon faded. She said with a smile, "Your Highness, thank you for your kindness. The Hehuan sect has no difficulty for the time being. If there is any difficulty, I will help you." That's good. Haha, they talked happily, but Chu Lu sighed in her heart. She wanted to find a way out from the first prince. But Dong Fangsheng's performance today made her understand that she only had one choice. At least Mr. Li didn't seem to be as reckless and stupid as the first prince. The river was rippling. The night in the Hong Yan house was quiet and peaceful. Under the river, Su Li, who went away and came back, leaned under the boat in black tights. She heard every word of the conversation between Chu Lu and the first prince. It turned out that the Hehuan sect was behind Dong Fangsheng. Su Li's eyes flashed. Chu Lu still hid something from her. Although they just cooperated, it was normal for Chu Lu to do so. But it didn't mean that she wouldn't blame her after she knew it. Between the first prince and the third prince, Su Li chose the first prince without any hesitation. It didn't mean that she thought highly of the first prince. It was because the Hong Yan house was an ordinary place for others. But she knew it was the stronghold of the Hehuan sect. As for the third prince, he had something to do with Ling Li's force. With Ling Qinglan's mediation, she didn't need to waste time. Thud, 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 there was a sound of footsteps on the boat. It was the sound of Chu Lu and the first prince leaving one after another. Only a few manservants were still cleaning up on the boat. Su Li listened quietly for a moment. When she noticed that the first prince's secret guards retreated, she immediately floated up quietly and was about to leave. All of a sudden, the lake was tumbling. Before Su Li emerged from the water, she saw a familiar and handsome face in the dim lake not far from her. Su Li opened her eyes slightly and showed a surprised expression. Ling Li. He actually went back and hid under the boat to eavesdrop. Maybe both of them were vigilant enough. They were afraid that the guards of the inborn realm around Dong Fangsheng would notice, so they didn't spread out their psychic awareness to investigate. They deliberately controlled the flow of the lake. The position where they eavesdropped was only a few inches away, and no one was near them. Ling Li was also shocked. He looked at Su Li. He didn't expect that Su Li would come back and do the same thing as him. She had no reason to do so. Gurgle. Maybe they were too close to each other. Su Li breathed slightly. A bubble came out of the water and made a light sound. Chapter 158. Slap. On the shore at night, Su Li slapped Ling Li indifferently. She didn't say anything and just took a deep look at his lips. Then she turned around and walked away. Her whole body was steaming like a fairy. She evaporated the river water in a few steps. She was no different from usual. Ling Li rubbed his cheeks and stroked his bitten lips with his fingertips. He stared at the beautiful figure in the distance with his starry eyes. From her violently heaving chest, he could see that she was not as indifferent and calm as she looked. That time in the yard in the valley, when she detoxified the poison for him, she took the initiative to kiss him. This time, he just wanted to cover his movement. But she bit his lips and slapped him hard. Why? There was a burning pain on his cheeks. Ling Li ran his vital energy to fade the red mark. The wound on his lips also scabbed. He turned around and went in the opposite direction instead of chasing Su Li. The night wind blew. Hierarch Ling's cold face flashed a slight smile. It seemed that he was slapped, but he was not angry. Instead, he was very happy. When Su Li returned to the Su house, Su Qingtan saw that she was tired. He stopped asking and let her have a good rest. Mammy Li had already boiled a whole bathtub of hot water and waited for Su Li to come back. Su Li took off her clothes and lay in the bathtub lazily. She closed her eyes and took a long breath. The scene under the river flashed in front of her eyes from time to time. She could still feel the touch on her lips. What a disappointment, Su Li sighed and got rid of the distractions in her mind. She made up her mind that she would never have anything to do with him in this life. She carefully avoided any possibility of meeting Ling Li, but she couldn't bear the fact that he took the initiative to see her. And she couldn't bear the strange coincidence. Mammy Li picked up the dirty clothes outside the screen. She felt strange when she held them in her hands. Why did the clothes seem to have just been washed? They were a little wrinkled. At the same time, in the Ling house, Ling Mo and Ling Xian stood aside quietly. Their eyes were focused on Ling Li's lips. Why did the master hurt his lips when he went to the banquet? What are you looking at? Even if Ling Li was calm enough, he couldn't bear being stared at by them for a quarter of an hour. He couldn't help but look up and said, "What are you looking at? Hurry up and reorganize the first prince's files." Ling Mo quickly became serious. He walked to the side and burned the outdated files. He said, "I didn't expect that Chu Lu of the Heng Yan house was a member of the Hehuan sect and she was with the first prince. If that's the case, we'll have to reevaluate the first prince's influence." A voice came from outside the door. The door of the study was opened. It was Ling Qinglan who just came from the third prince. When Ling Qinglan entered the room, he saw the wound on Ling Li's lips and was shocked. "Your mouth. It's all because of your stupid idea." Ling Li stood up directly from the wheelchair. He pointed at Ling Qinglan's nose and scolded, "If you didn't ask me to pretend to be crazy to find Dongfang Sheng, I wouldn't have been scolded by that boor. He overturned my banquet table and I had to keep smiling." Although he didn't make it clear, Ling Li's words clearly meant that the first prince turned over the table and caused the injury on his lips. Pooh! Ling Mo couldn't hold back his laughter. Ling Xian covered her mouth and didn't laugh. Ling Qinglan also couldn't help laughing and ridiculed, "Isn't it your strength to pretend to be crazy and silly? I made the best use of you. If you didn't endure humiliation, we couldn't get such important information." Ling Li looked at Ling Mo and said faintly, "Now, immediately. Run 100 laps around the drill ground. Don't use your genuine qi." Ling Mo immediately smiled bitterly and said, "Why only me?" It was destined that no one would answer this question. He glanced at Ling Xian who secretly gave him a gesture of encouragement and then glanced at Ling Qinglan who was full of encouragement. Finally, he went out of the study dejectedly. As soon as Ling Mo left, the three of them were relieved. Ling Xian and Ling Qinglan secretly thought that the master finally vented his anger. Poor Ling Mo. A certain someone thought to himself, "I've finally muddled my way through. How about Dongfang Lang?" Ling Li sat down again and calmed down. Ling Qinglan smiled slightly and said, "Of course, it's smooth. I think Dongfang Lang will praise this plan and trust me more tomorrow. After all, I've even used my own cousin this time." Ling Li's face darkened. Since Ling Qinglan joined them, Ling Qinglan had made fun of him a lot. But this time, Ling Qinglan even schemed against Su Li. Su Li was not a person who didn't take revenge. Ling Qinglan's life was still in her hands. Ling Qinglan would regret in the future. Ling Li laughed in his heart but didn't show any clue on the surface. After they talked for a while, Ling Qinglan left. Nothing happened that night. The next day, the sky was dark and it seemed that it was going to rain heavily. There were few pedestrians on the street. Few people were willing to go out in this weather. Mammy Lee thoughtfully prepared an umbrella for Suli. Suli took it and was about to go out. Su Zipei came in from the door and said, "Second sister, father said that the restaurant is not busy today. He wants you to see the boiler." Su Zipei seemed to be afraid of Su Qingtan's lesson. She didn't make trouble for Su Li for several days. She stayed at home and only went out to buy medicine for her mother. Today was not the day to buy medicine for Zhu Yan. Su Li's eyes dimmed. She pretended to be surprised and said, "Father said that I don't need to go to the restaurant." Why? Su Zipei was a little flustered. She forced herself to calm down and said, "How do I know? That's what father said. I'm going to take care of my mother." With that, Su Zipei turned around and ran into the courtyard. It was obvious that she was running for her life. Su Li pondered for a moment and sat in the carriage. Under the coachman's inquiring eyes, she smiled sweetly and said, "Go to the Baiwei building." After an hour and a half, the carriage stopped in front of the Baiwei building. The business was not as poor as Su Zipei said. On rainy days, many people had nothing to do, so more people came to enjoy delicious food. Su Huanli was very busy. When he suddenly saw Su Li, he didn't doubt her. He immediately pulled her and told her quickly, "You come just in time. Several boilers are not working well. Go and have a look." Su Huanli nodded. Su Li was stunned. Did Su Zipei really come to the Baiwei building in the morning? Could it be that she had been overly sensitive recently and was overthinking things? Being pushed into the kitchen, Su Li saw several boilers were overused. She quickly called several helpers to start refurbishing them. At this moment, Master Ma Ling sneaked into the building with a few henchmen. They glanced around and didn't see Su Li. They immediately breathed a sigh of relief and found an empty seat to sit down. "Give me a plate of the signature dishes of your inn. I'm not short of money." Ma Ling stretched out his hand and slapped an ingot of silver on the table. The waiter immediately went to the kitchen to serve them. "Master, I heard that the dishes of the Baiwei building are delicious." "Do we really?" One of the henchmen leaned over and whispered. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Ma Ling immediately knocked him on the head and scolded in a low voice, "Useless thing. As long as this thing is done, we can all get rid of the affiliated school and become real students of the National Academy. That is the talent of the National Academy. It is impossible for him to lie." The henchman shrank his neck. It seemed that he was attracted by the prospect that Ma Ling said and no longer refuted. "But before that, let me taste the taste of the beggar's chicken. I won't be able to eat this dish in the future." Ma Ling smiled and didn't eat immediately. He waited until all the dishes were served. After eating and drinking, he secretly took out a white sandalwood and lit it. Then he put it under the table. Today's wind happened to blow into the restaurant. In the snickering of Ma Ling and others, the colorless and odorless smoke floated all over the Baiwei building. At this moment, Su Li, who was repairing the boiler in the kitchen, didn't notice it at all. After a while, there was a burst of wailing in the restaurant. "Ah! My stomach hurts. What's the matter? I feel dizzy." Plop! A fat man who had eaten many plates of the beggar's chicken suddenly foamed at the mouth. He slid down the chair and lay on the ground, twitching violently. Others were shocked. "Don't eat. There is something wrong with today's dishes." Ah ah ah. The whole Baiwei building was suddenly in chaos. More and more people fell down and foamed at the mouth. Some people staggered to the street. Finally, they turned their eyes and lay directly on the road. This strange scene immediately attracted the attention of the passers-by outside. In less than 10 breaths of time, a large group of people had gathered around. Seeing that the situation was not good, the waiters finally shouted in panic, "Master! Master, it's not good. All the guests are vomiting." Su Huanli looked at the guests lying on the ground. At this moment, his mind was blank. The Baiwei building had been open for several months. How could it suddenly become like this? Hearing the noise, Su Li immediately put down her work and rushed to the front hall. Seeing such a tragic scene, she couldn't help but shrink her pupils. She swept to the front of the nearest person who fell down. She put her hand on the pulse and felt a little numb. He was poisoned, and it was highly toxic. There were so many people. The antidote she brought was not enough at all. Father, it's not too late. Immediately send them to the clinic for detoxification. Otherwise, we can't afford to bear the responsibility if they all die. Su Li said hurriedly. She had rushed to the side of several people with the most severe symptoms of poisoning. She took out several silver needles she carried with her to suppress the toxins. Su Huanli was at a loss at this moment. Hearing Su Li's words, he immediately ordered the waiters to go to the clinic to call people. The waiters realized that the Baiwei building was in a big trouble. If all these people died in the restaurant, they couldn't escape the blame. Hearing Su Huanli's order, they immediately pushed away the wall of onlookers and ran wildly. Fortunately, the location of the Baiwei building was excellent. It was not far from the clinic. Soon, the waiters got a large group of people from the clinic to help. Su Li breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly, she glimpsed a person who fell beside the door of the Baiwei building. Her pupils shrank violently. She crossed the distance in 2 or 3 steps and came to the person. Seeing the person's face, Su Li narrowed her eyes and various thoughts passed through her mind. This was Ma Ling, the only son of the minister of the Ministry of Revenue. Chapter 159. Such a big accident happened in the Baiwei building. Fan Dekheng, the officer of the Ministry of the capital city, responded very quickly. He immediately sent people to block the Baiwei building. But when Fan Dekheng saw Ma Ling and a group of rich disciples who followed him died in the shop, he turned around and ran away without saying anything. The son of the minister of the Ministry of Revenue was dead, and so were the eldest sons of the rich and powerful families. It was a hot potato. If he didn't do it well, he would lose his official position. It was a big matter. He couldn't manage it. Ling Qinglan of the Supreme Judiciary and Chen Gong of the Ministry of Penalty were not afraid of trouble. He was old and it was better not to get involved. Lord, don't go. I'm wronged. Seeing that Fan Dekheng just came and left, Su Huanli didn't have time to say a word. He hurriedly chased after him, but was stopped by the officer of the Ministry of Penalty. Under the attack of the officer of the Ministry of Penalty, he couldn't act rashly. He could only raise his hands in panic and slowly retreat. Su Li stood aside with light in her eyes. She didn't check the cause of death of Ma Ling and others. It was meaningless. All the money of Ma Ling and others disappeared. It was obvious that someone erased all the traces under the guise of theft. It was difficult to find out anything. Soon, the people of the Supreme Judiciary and the Ministry of Penalty arrived. Fan Dekheng was very tactful. He didn't want to offend anyone. At the same time, he sent the news to the people of both sides. Ling Qinglan and Chen Gong met in front of the Baiwei building. Their expressions remained unchanged, but their eyes changed. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. The Supreme Judiciary and the Ministry of Penalty were in charge of major cases. They competed fiercely and had a bad relationship. Ling Qinglan sighed in his heart and immediately said with a smile, Lord Chen, you are busy with old cases. How about handing over the case of the Baiwei building to me? Chen Gong said with a cold face and an indifferent voice, the Ministry of Penalty will deal with this matter. You, the Supreme Judiciary, should avoid arousing suspicion. Ling Qinglan's smile slowly disappeared. This old guy really didn't give him any face. Su Qingtan, why are all the recent major cases related to you? Thinking of this, he took a step back and bowed to salute. He said loudly, Lord Chen, there must be injustice in this case. Please don't punish them, lest they make a big mistake. Chen Gong snorted and stepped into the byway building without looking back. Ling Qinglan waved his hand and motioned them to go back. His confidant behind him couldn't help but transmit the sound in silence. Lord, are we just going to leave like this? Ling Qinglan raised his eyebrows and said, otherwise? This is related to Su Qingtan. Even if I snatch the case from Chen Gong and find out the real murderer, I will not be able to convince the public. I've already said what I need to say. The rest is up to the Su family's luck. While talking, Su Li's delicate figure flashed in Ling Qinglan's mind. He couldn't help but click his tongue. He only hoped that the girl could hold on. The means of the Ministry of Penalty were not easy. Su Li was not surprised to see Chen Gong come in. It would be strange if the Supreme Judiciary could receive this case. Chen Gong bent down to check the corpses of Ma Ling and others. Then he stood up and glanced at Su Huanli and other waiters who were so scared that they almost wet their pants. Finally, his eyes stayed on Su Li for a moment and he said coldly, take all the people of the byway building into custody and send them to the Ministry of Penalty for interrogation. Take all the corpses away and hand them over to the coroner to find out the cause of death. Block the byway building. No irrelevant person is allowed to approach during the investigation period. The Ministry of Penalty immediately took action after the cold orders were given. The business of the E building diagonally across the street finally improved. Wu Xiuxiu stood in front of the window sill on the second floor and watched the people of the Ministry of Penalty leave with Su Li and others. She couldn't help but doubt. Brother, it's Chen Gong. Wu Jin smiled slightly and played with the unburned sandalwood in his hand. He said, without this thing, who can think that Ma Ling and others poisoned themselves? They are also the culprits of poisoning the byway building. Even if Chen Gong is resourceful and can trace it to me, he can't arrest the descendants of the Wu family without evidence. Then, Wu Jin gently folded the half-burned sandalwood in his hand and instantly pinched it into powder. Wu Xiuxiu looked at her arrogant and high-spirited brother. Her eyes flashed with obsession. If she was not her brother's sister, how good it would be, in the prison of the Ministry of Penalty. All the people of the byway building were detained separately, including the waiters. Su Li was in a mixed women's cell, in which more than a dozen female prisoners in dirty white prison uniforms were locked up. Seeing that a newcomer came in and hadn't changed into a prisoner's uniform, several female prisoners' eyes immediately lit up and they rushed to Su Li crazily. These people had been locked up for a long time and were delirious. They were all crazy. Su Li frowned and dodged. She slightly slapped away several female prisoners who went too far and touched their wounds. They screamed and finally came to their senses. They shrank in the corner again and looked at Su Li with fear and undisguised hatred. I didn't expect that you are a martial artist. Little girl, do you know what it means to expose your cultivation in the Ministry of Penalty? The gray-haired old woman squatting in the innermost room sneered. Her voice was as harsh as a night owl. Ha 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 ha, the rest of the female prisoners immediately laughed with the old woman. Su Li slightly pursed her thin lips and gradually narrowed her eyes. In her previous life, she was imprisoned in the watered dungeon of the Ministry of Penalty for a year. How could she know the fate of warriors in the Ministry of Penalty? However, even if she didn't expose her cultivation, her identity had already been known in Yunjing City. How could the disciple of the royal preceptor have no cultivation? Suddenly, there were 2 footsteps in the cold dungeon. Although the conversation was light, Su Li still heard it clearly. Hey, 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 after a slightly perverted laugh, he said, I haven't seen a virgin being tortured for a long time. This is a good job. Lao Wu, why don't you give this job to me? Bullshit. I have been waiting for this moment for 10 years. You want to exchange with me? Go away. Su Li's eyes gradually became cold. She was careless. After all, Yunjing was Yunjing. She knew that someone would deal with her, but when it really happened, she couldn't think of a way to deal with it. Although the Ministry of Penalty was heavily guarded, it was absolutely easy for her to escape if she wanted to. But she couldn't escape. If she escaped, the sin of the byway building would definitely be put on her head. Her eldest brother would also be implicated by her and his career would be ruined. She had such regrets in her previous life. In this life, she absolutely didn't want to see it. Who is Suli? Come out to be interrogated. While she was thinking, two jailers who specialized in execution appeared in front of the dungeon with their eyes shining. Suli was arrested by the Ministry of Penalty. Seeing the news from Ling Qinglan, Ling Li's expression changed slightly. Ling Xian was also worried. If the woman died in the Ministry of Penalty, no one could save Ling Qinglan's injury. Why don't I go there? Ling Mo was nervous. He knew the relationship between the master and Suli. It was absolutely not as estranged as it seemed. No. Ling Li reached out to turn the switch on the wall. He took out a set of casual clothes and a mask and turned away. He said, "Your figure has been exposed last time. Just in case, I will go in person." Ling Xian watched Ling Li leave in a daze. Was Master's nervousness the same as hers? Ling Mo glanced at her cautiously and didn't dare to say more. The three people in the room had their own thoughts. Ling Qinglan was the most confused. Who was Suli to Ling Li? Why was everyone nervous when they heard that Suli had an accident? Was there any secret that he didn't know? Ling Qinglan thought for a few years. He patted the fan in his hand and became serious. Finally, he didn't ask more questions. With his broken body, he could live for at most half a year. What could he do if he knew it? Back to the Supreme Judiciary, Ling Qinglan entered the study and saw Su Qingtan, who seemed to have been waiting for him for a long time. "Lord, how are my sister and others?" Su Qingtan clenched his fists. He had heard it from people who came back, but he still wanted to get confirmation from Ling Qinglan. Ling Qinglan raised his eyebrows and said lightly, "It's not a big deal to be imprisoned by the Ministry of Penalty. After all, the matter has not been investigated. Your father will be fine, but your sister may be." Hearing the second half of the sentence, Su Qingtan's heart seemed to be twisted fiercely. He felt suffocated and said, "My second sister. What will happen to her?" Ling Qinglan smiled and said, "It seems that you are not surprised that Qi Xianqing is your sister's master. You should have seen Qi Xianqing, so you should know that Qi Xianqing is not a simple royal preceptor. He is also a powerful man who has reached the peak of the inborn realm. Do you think that he will not teach his disciple Xiangong?" Su Qingtan's pupils shrank slightly. "You mean, but the second sister never showed any martial arts in front of him. She didn't look like a person who knew Xiangong at all." Ling Qinglan sneered unabashedly, "Su Li's cultivation has reached the acquired 8th hurdle. As her elder brother, your cultivation is not as good as her." "Tut tut," Su Qingtan's face turned red because he was humiliated. He growled, "Don't say it." Ling Qinglan was not angry. He knocked on the table with his fingers and said, "But in the future, after your sister suffers the punishment of piercing the bones, you still have many chances to surpass her." Piercing the bones? Su Qingtan's face turned pale. He stepped forward and grasped the edge of the table tightly. He roared, "Why does she have to be pierced the bones? Isn't she not convicted? Does the Ministry of Penalty dare to punish the disciple of the royal preceptor? If you have time to be angry with me, why don't you go to your idol to have a try?" Ling Qinglan stopped smiling. There was a strong pressure out of nowhere, which made Su Qingtan feel that he was facing the world. He said, "Unfortunately, the rule that warriors have to be pierced the bones when they enter the Ministry of Penalty is set by Lord Qingong, whom you worship." Su Qingtan held his breath. When he thought that his second sister, who had suffered a lot since childhood, finally had a few happy days, she had to suffer inhumane punishment. He was so distressed that he trembled all over. Why wasn't he the one who was punished? Taking a deep breath, Su Qingtan's eyes became gloomy. He said, Ling Qinglan, last time you said that there was a way to make me stronger quickly. No matter what the price is, I promise you. Chapter 160. Embark cult. It sounded familiar. Su Qingtan frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, he was shocked. Wasn't it the Yinma cult that the Han dynasty had been afraid of and wanted to exterminate? Ling Qinglan turned out to be a member of the Yinma cult. At the same time, he was the minister of the Supreme Judiciary. Su Qingtan felt a sense of trembling in his heart. How many people wanted Ling Qinglan, who had a clean background, to be a high official in the Han dynasty? Not to mention anything else, the Supreme Judiciary must have been infiltrated by Ling Qinglan a lot, and he would become one of them today. Suddenly, Su Qingtan felt that his shoulder was patted. His uncertain eyes suddenly focused and he returned to his own situation. Ling Qinglan's smile was as elegant as usual. But today, in Su Qingtan's eyes, it was evil. Don't panic. The Yinma cult is not as terrible as you think. The Han dynasty is afraid of it and deliberately vilifies it. In recent years, we have been the scapegoat for the Dongfang family a lot. Then why is it still called the Yinma cult? Su Qingtan stared at Ling Qinglan. If he didn't agree today, he would not leave the study. It was better to inquire more about the Yinma cult, pretend to join it, and then wait for the opportunity. Ling Qinglan's slender fingers tapped the table gently. The crisp sound fell into Su Qingtan's ears. It seemed that his heart was gently grasped. Every tap made his heart beat strangely and his blood flow was not smooth. Su Qingtan groaned and knelt on the ground. At this time, Ling Qinglan's voice sounded. Su Qingtan, in the future, you will be a member of the Yinma cult, and I will be your master. Don't talk to me in this tone. Do you know? I will ask Ling Shi to teach you later. Since it's your first offense, I will spare you this time. His fingers loosened, and the voice disappeared. Su Qingtan breathed a sigh of relief and collapsed on the ground like a dog. Ling Qinglan, who used to be a strict but good teacher in his eyes, had already become a very terrible evil figure. As for the Yinma cult, the hierarch didn't want to establish it. But there is karma. Since people call it evil, then it is evil. The so-called decent is just a gold brick that those sanctimonious hypocrites put on their faces. It is not rare. It seemed that Ling Qinglan explained clearly, but it seemed that he didn't explain anything. Su Qingtan was silent for a while. Ling Qinglan asked him whether he joined the cult or not, but he got a lot of doctrines. It turned out that Ling Qinglan said, Yinma cult. He had become a member of the Yinma cult and had no right to choose. For the sake of our friendship in the past, I will personally teach you Xian Qi as a way to fulfill my promise to you. However, if I'm not satisfied with your cultivation progress, I'll personally cripple you so that I won't lose face. After saying that, he extended his hand and threw out a rubbing booklet. This is a superior Xian Gong. I don't ask you to understand much when you go back, but remember to memorize it and burn it. I don't need to say more about the preciousness of Xian Gong, right? Looking at the booklet lying quietly on the ground, Su Qingtan took a deep breath and suppressed the throbbing in his eyes. After he entered Yunjing, he knew that Xian Gong was not taught to outsiders. What he learned in the Supreme Judiciary was just the most common third-rate Xian Gong. If he didn't learn from his family, he had no chance to learn those advanced Xian Gong. Now, the superior Xian Gong that he had been dreaming of was in front of him, but he couldn't feel any joy in his heart. Instead, he was deeply confused. He didn't know whether it was right or wrong to do so. Su Qingtan picked up the booklet and stood up. He hesitated for a moment and ended the meeting in the way of the Supreme Judiciary. I'll leave first. Seeing Su Qingtan leave, Ling Qinglan's eyes became cold and apologetic in the blink of an eye. The middle-aged guard beside him, who had been like a sculpture, finally came to life. He gestured to Ling Qinglan that he didn't need to do this. Ling Qinglan smiled and said, "Is it too much?" The more I go too far now, the guiltier he will be after I leave. That guilt can firmly restrain him and let him stay in the Yin cult to take over my position. Moreover, I don't have time to explain. It's better to let him obediently accept everything I arrange. The middle-aged guard was stunned. He shook his head and gestured again. You didn't tell the hierarch about it, but you acted on your own. At that time, that mess will be left to Ling Li to clean up. I don't care so much. Ling Qinglan patted the paper fan and stood up. He looked calm and said, let's go and continue to try the case. After that, I can continue to investigate the matter of the Yi family. On the way to the dungeon, the chains of the shackles clanked when they touched the ground. Su Li looked down at the ground. In the impatient words of the two jailers, she walked more and more slowly. The smell of blood was getting stronger and stronger. Didn't you eat? Go faster. If the emperor breaks the law, he will be punished the same as the common people. What's more, you are just a common person with an undeserved reputation. Do you think that someone will come to save you? Su Li was suddenly pushed by the jailer. She staggered out. The shackles on her feet were too short. Finally, she failed to stabilize her body and lay on the ground. The tip of her nose and arms were rubbed with blood. Ha 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 ha, what acquired eighth hurdle? You are still the same. You are so weak. The two jailers gloated and laughed. Her pupils were gloomy and she slowly got up. Although the shackles were made of black iron and could trap any warrior below the peak of the acquired realm, they couldn't trap her. The shackles under her feet were as fragile as tofu for her. They would be broken if she exerted a little strength. But she couldn't do that. If she did that, it would be equal to announcing to the world that she had already been a senior of the unborn realm. In that case, the things in the Qinghe town would be unexplainable and there would be more troubles. Su Li frowned when she stood up and walked 2 steps. She finally arrived at the torture chamber. The two jailers walked in with Su Li. Suddenly, they saw a person sitting on the table next to the torture instruments. They were shocked and immediately went forward. Lord, why are you here? Chen Gong glanced at Su Li, who was covered with bruises. He was expressionless. He turned to the two jailers who came over and slapped them. Clap, clap. The two jailers turned 3 times and fell to the ground with great force. They spat out 2 or 3 teeth and their mouths were full of blood. But they were not angry. Instead, they were all frightened. They didn't have time to pick up their teeth. They got up and crawled to Chen Gong and kowtowed again and again. I know I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. They didn't know what they had done wrong. But countless previous examples told them that what they should do now was to kneel down and kowtow to apologize in front of the temperamental Chen Gong. Chen Gong took off the key rings from their waists, stretched out his legs and kicked them away. He said coldly, "Get out." The two jailers felt that they were pardoned. They immediately got up and left the torture chamber. One of them lamented in his heart. He should have thought of it. Of course, Lord Chen liked to do such a good job by himself. He was asking for trouble. Only Chen Gong and Su Li were left in the torture room. Seeing that Su Li bowed her head and didn't speak, Chen Gong looked a little relaxed. He pulled Su Li in front of him and bent down to untie the handcuffs and ankle cuffs for her. Then he took out a jailer's clothes and put them in front of Su Li. "Put them on and follow me." Su Li took over the clothes and was stunned. Although Chen Gong had saved her before, it didn't mean that she had a deep relationship with Chen Gong. She never thought that Chen Gong would play favoritism for her. But how could she explain the scene in front of her? Chen Gong put the shackles back to the original position and said without looking back, "Put them on quickly. The dungeon is humid. Let's go out first." Putting on the jailer's clothes and the official hat, Su Li lowered her head. Chen Gong nodded and covered her eyebrows and eyes with the official hat. In this way, no one in the Ministry of Penalty would think that she was a criminal if she followed him. Even if Su Li went out with him openly, no one dared to stop her. So, Chen Gong chose a milder way. Pushing open the dungeon door, Qingong walked up as usual. Su Li followed him and passed by an inconspicuous jailer. She suddenly felt something strange and looked back, only to see the figure disappear at the entrance of the dungeon. Who was that? She should have no acquaintance in the Ministry of Penalty. Don't look around. Follow me. Hearing Qingong's order, Su Li could only suppress her doubts and followed him to a quiet room. Pushing the door and entering, Su Li smelled rotten. It was a morgue. At a glance, Su Li saw Ma Ling and others alone. Why did Qingong bring her here? Obviously, the people in the room had been cleared out by Qingong in advance. He took Su Li to Ma Ling's body and said, "You are the apprentice of Qi Xianqing. You must have extraordinary insight in medical circle. The coroner of the Ministry of Penalty is an ordinary person after all. He can't be compared with the martial arts circle. Can you check and see if you can find anything?" Su Li hesitated and said, "I am a sinner. How can I?" Qingong raised his eyebrows and said in a low voice, "Just check. Don't talk so much nonsense." Su Li seemed to be scared and hurriedly went to Ma Ling's body to check. Seeing that she quickly got into the mood, Qingong praised her in his heart. She deserved to be the apprentice of the miracle-working doctor. He found a chair and sat down. Looking at Su Li's charming back, even the jailer's clothes couldn't hide her lovely temperament. He was gradually in a trance. He used to hate and be crazy. He vented all his resentment on the prisoners. Then, he got the name of a cruel official. Others said that he was ruthless and didn't recognize his relatives when he handled a case. Whether he was right or wrong, he would punish him first. But it was obvious that Su Li took the blame for someone else. He had been an official for many years. How could he not even see this clue? What's more, for Su Li who was not much different from his daughter, he couldn't do it. "Qingjun, it should be right for me to do this." Thinking of his wife's voice and smile, Qingong had all kinds of complex thoughts in his heart. Finally, he sighed deeply. The empty torture room. The jailer, who looked like a teenager, was so fast that he seemed to be divided into several shadows. He quickly checked all the scaffolds. There is no new blood. Ling Li's eyes flashed. That was to say, Su Li was not tortured. But he searched the whole cell and found no trace of Su Li. Su Li. Where was she taken? Pulling the brim of the hat, Ling Li suddenly remembered the gaze staring at him from behind before he came in. That was Su Li. Su Li didn't hide her pneuma. As long as he paid a little attention, he could detect her. At that time, he was concerned about the dungeon and ignored it. Now he was sure that it was Su Li. Su Li changed into the jailer's clothes and was taken away by Qingong. Qingong saved her before. Ling Li frowned slightly. Was there any relationship between them that he didn't know? Chapter 161. After an hour, Su Li finally checked the death of Ma Ling and the other 4 people. "Lord Chen, the cause of death of Ma Ling and the other 4 people is the same. They were all poisoned. I may need to go back to the affiliated school to do a test. But one thing is clear. The poison in their bodies is different from that of the guests in the restaurant. It is a more sophisticated mixed poison. A mixed poison different from that of the guests in the restaurant." Qingong raised his eyebrows slightly. Finally, he heard a key point that was different from what the coroner said. "Yes." Su Li took off her gloves and came to Qingong. She said carefully, "When I helped others to suppress the poison in the restaurant that day, I found that the poison was fierce but not immediately fatal. But Ma Ling and the other 4 people were poisoned by the throat-sealing poison. There was no time to rescue them. That is to say, someone wanted them to die immediately." Dead people tell no tales. Qingong's eyes flickered. What was the reason that Ma Ling and the other 4 people were killed immediately without saying a word? Ma Ling was not a small figure. He was the only son of the minister of the Ministry of Revenue. If he was not famous and adhered to the rules, Ma Weiming would have come to the Ministry of Penalty and asked him to punish the Su family immediately. However, Qin Gong heard that Ma Weiming had told the matter to the emperor. If he didn't hurry to find out the truth, Su Li would be in danger. People thought that the emperor and the royal preceptor were as close as father and son. But only Qin Gong knew that the relationship between the emperor and the royal preceptor was not harmonious. On the contrary, the emperor was only afraid of Qi Xianqing. Otherwise, how could Qi Xianqing not stay in Yunjing? He clearly knew that if he appeared, the emperor would be stimulated. But why did he frequently send disciples to Yunjing? This was the only thing he was confused about. Lord Qin. Su Li called him. Qin Gong came to his sense and got rid of distractions. He said, "In this case, I will accompany you to the affiliated school. However, if the behind-the-scenes manipulator is really prepared, I am afraid that the affiliated school." Lord Qin, don't worry. The affiliated school will be fine. But my current identity. Su Li glanced at her nondescript clothes helplessly. A rare smile appeared on Qin Gong's face. He took out a good-quality disguise pill and said, "You can be my assistant for the time being and help me solve the case." Su Li was surprised. The grade of disguise elixir given by Qin Gong was not low. At least, it could hide from the eyes of warriors below the inborn realm. The value of this elixir was very high. Lord Qin, there's no need for that. Su Li ran the secret method, and her face changed into another person. My master taught me the secret method of disguise, and now it comes in handy. This time, it was Qin Gong's turn to be stunned. Qi Xianqing must have taught her that the secret method of disguise could not be easily shown to others. Did she trust him so much? For a moment, Qin Gong's thoughts became more complicated. When Ling Li came back, Ling Mo saw that there was no one behind him, so he felt strange. Could it be that even the master couldn't enter the Ministry of Penalty now? Young master, before Ling Mo asked, Ling Li waved his hand and interrupted him. He changed his clothes and sat back in the wheelchair. He rubbed his chin and said strangely, "Ling Mo, what do you think can move Qin Gong's heart?" Ling Mo was slightly stunned. He didn't understand why the master suddenly asked this, but he still replied, "Probably not. Do you remember that Qin Gong's uncle committed a crime a few years ago? Qin Gong was cold-hearted and didn't show any mercy. He tortured Qin Gong to death and confessed. After this incident, Qin Gong truly became a loner. All of his relatives refused to contact him even if they died. Even family affection couldn't move him. Is there anything else that can surpass family affection? What you said is reasonable, so it is more strange." Ling Li rubbed his lips with his fingers and said, "Why did Qin Gong only treat Su Li differently and even violate his own principles to rescue her from the dungeon?" Hearing this, Ling Mo and Ling Xian were both shocked. If Ling Li didn't say it himself, they even thought that someone was joking. Ling Xian's eyes flashed with wisdom and she said softly, "Young master, Qin Gong's past has always been vague. No one knows what he experienced in the past to become like this. Maybe he doesn't want to mention it. But even the Tianya house can't find it. It is unreasonable. It is very likely that Su Li really has a secret relationship with Qin Gong. Su Li seems to have a clean background, but all kinds of signs show that her background is not simple. Young master, when you contact with her, you should be careful." Ling Li frowned and a light flashed in his eyes. He ordered in a low voice, "Use the spies of the Ministry of Penalty to investigate all the cases related to the Qin Palace. Since the Supreme Judiciary can't be found, the Ministry of Penalty is his territory. He should leave some clues." Ling Xian was shocked and said repeatedly, "Young master. It is not easy to cultivate spies. Once exposed, it is easy to alert the enemy. Just for Qin Gong, it is really." Ling Xian. Ling Mo suddenly interrupted her with a cold voice. Ling Xian's face changed slightly and her heart thumped. She immediately looked up and saw a frosty face. She felt more bitter in her heart. She didn't realize it and violated the taboo of the young master. Xian, how many years have you been with me? Ling Li said lightly, which made Ling Xian panic. She bowed her head and said obediently, young master, you picked me up when you were 7 years old. It has been 10 years. 10 years. Haven't you learned the rules of staying with me? Ling Xian's eyes were full of tears when she heard Ling Li's increasingly severe tone. She said aggrievedly, I know I am wrong. I am also worried about you. I accidentally. Please punish me, young master. Ling Li looked indifferent. He closed his eyes and waved his hand, the punishment is the same as before. Go out. Ling Xian was slightly happy and immediately went out of the study. As long as she could get the forgiveness of the young master, she was willing to run 1,000 or 10,000 laps, let alone 100 laps. Except for Ling Li, there was only Ling Mo in the room. Ling Mo glanced at Ling Xian who was running crazily on the martial arts field. He couldn't help but be speechless. He turned back and said, young master, I am afraid that Ling Xian. Ling Li looked a little annoyed. Ling Mo immediately swallowed the second half of the sentence. Ling Li closed the file and a trace of tiredness flashed through his eyebrows. He said, why did she do that? The Ling mansion is a dangerous place. Second brother and I both know it. We won't let any woman suffer after entering the Ling mansion. Even if you. Young master. Ling Mo stood straight and his eyes were as firm as a rock. He said, I am the sword in the hand of the young master. Where I am, the sword is. If the man died, the sword would die. The second half of the sentence sounded in his heart. His life was given by the young master. If the young master died, he would definitely follow the young master without any hesitation. Seeing Ling Mo like this, Ling Li was even more worried. All of them were like this. If they were all like Su Li, avoiding him as if he was a plague, he would worry a lot less. No. That was not good. When he thought of Su Li's face, which was full of smiles to everyone but him, he couldn't help but hate her. Did he owe her in his previous life? Even if he was a playboy, his appearance was not ugly. His family was a super rich and powerful family in Yunjing. Why did she hate him so much? It was just a kiss forced by the situation. Did she have to slap him so hard? Looking at the uncertain expression of the young master, Ling Mo consciously retreated and closed the door. It was better to stay away from the young master in this state. In the affiliated school of the National Academy. Without Su Li, the affiliated school was not as lively as imagined. Ma Ling was also the top playboy in Yunjing. Now he suddenly died. Everyone was in danger. Many young masters hid at home and didn't dare to go out. Chen Gong pushed the door and walked in with Su Li. He saw a fat man sitting in the school and staring blankly at the teacher's desk. Chen Gong didn't expect that someone dared to stay here. He couldn't help but be stunned. Then he was more surprised when he saw the face of the latter. The first master of the Tang family, Tang Lei, was known to be weak. He was one of the 3 useless people in Yunjing. It seemed that he was not as timid and weak as the rumor said. Su Li was surprised when she saw him. Today, Tang Lei was completely different from the liveliness on the first day. There were 2 dark eye sockets on his round face. He exuded the lethargy of an old man. He was dying. When Chen Gong approached, he also noticed that Tang Lei was in a bad state. He immediately became serious. Tang Lei heard the noise and looked at the door. When he saw that it was Chen Gong, his joy immediately turned into panic. He didn't expect that he waited here for 3 days. Instead of Su Li, the most terrible person in Yunjing City came. Lord Chen, I'm Tang Tang Tang. Tang Lei stammered for a long time, but he didn't say his name. He was so anxious that he almost cried, I'm going. Then, He was about to rush past Qin Gong. But Qin Gong grabbed his back collar and said sternly, "Stop. You can't go anywhere today." Ah! Tang Lei was very flustered. When he thought of the inhumane means of Qin Gong in the rumor, he was so scared that he almost cried. Qin Gong shook his head again and again. The rumor was true. No wonder that person called him a rotten wall that can't hold up the mud. He slowed down and asked, "I won't catch you. What are you doing here? Tell me the truth." Tang Lei was caught by Qin Gong, but he couldn't escape. He could only accept his fate and said obediently, "I come here because, to find Lecturer Su. I want to ask her if there is any more of the medicine she gave me." "What?" Tang Lei sighed and said weakly, "The medicine that Lecturer Su gave me made me suffer a lot, but it's not a big deal. But after a while, I felt heavier. Especially recently, I could sleep very well. But my eye sockets were dark. It seemed that I didn't sleep at all. I was so scared. After thinking about it, I could only come here to find Lecturer Su." Qin Gong was slightly moved. He turned to look at Su Li beside him, but Su Li looked more serious than him. She said, "What unusual things have you eaten recently? Or, where have you been?" Tang Lei was extremely gentle. Although Su Li dressed like a jailer, he didn't feel insulted when she asked him. Instead, he thought about it seriously and murmured, "I haven't been anywhere. Brother Li has been fascinated by Lecturer Su recently. He always said that he would study at home to increase his talent. I have no place to go, so I stay at home. But I seem to eat more than before." Su Li's eyes flashed. She grabbed Tang Lei's fat wrist. A green light that couldn't be detected by people of the inborn realm flowed into Tang Lei's body along the tendons and vessels. Ouch! Tang Lei immediately squatted down holding his belly and farted several times. Ignoring Qin Gong, he immediately ran to the latrine pit. Qin Gong frowned and waved his hand to disperse the stench. It was not like, but a rotten smell of a corpse. "Su Li, what's wrong with him? What did you give him before?" Su Li didn't hide it. She told Qin Gong what she found when she met Tang Lei for the first time. Qin Gong frowned. In this way, someone wanted to kill Tang Lei secretly. But Su Li's means seemed to alarm him, so he accelerated the speed of killing Tang Lei. Chapter 162. After waiting for a long time, they saw Tang Lei walk over with a weak face, clutching his stomach. Although his face was pale, the dark circles under his eyes had obviously faded, and the death qi on his body had dissipated a lot. At least, he didn't look like he was about to die. Qin Gong was surprised. He only saw Su Li feel Tang Lei's pulse without using other means, but she could make Tang Lei get better quickly. Her medical attainments were not much worse than Qi Xianqing's. No wonder Qi Xianqing would accept her as his last disciple. Su Li stretched out her hand to Tang Lei again. Tang Lei showed a look of fear. His fat body trembled, but he still stretched out his wrist. The feeling just now reminded him of Su Li and made him understand that the little jailer in front of him would not hurt him. This time, Su Li took away her hand after feeling the pulse and said, "It's okay for the time being. Don't eat 3 meals a day at home. Even if you want to drink water, you have to go outside. Isn't Ling Li your good brother? Why don't you ask him for help? You'd better live in the Ling house." Tang Lei understood the meaning of Su Li's words and stood still with a dull face. After a long time, he came to his senses. With a deep sense of loss in his eyes, he murmured, "I don't fight for anything. Why do I still?" Qin Gong narrowed his eyes and transmitted the sound to Su Li, "Are you sure about detoxification? There are enough materials in the mansion. If Lord Chen is willing to wait, we can cure him today. But the person who poisoned him hasn't appeared yet. Even if I detoxify him, I can't guarantee that he won't be poisoned again. Then let's do it." Qin Gong transmitted his voice and waved at Tang Lei, "You, come with us. Tang Lei also found that Qin Gong was not as terrible as he had imagined. He nodded and followed them into the inner hall of the affiliated school. Seeing that they didn't stop, he wanted to say something but stopped several times. Finally, he couldn't help saying, "Lord Qin, this is Lecturer Su's place. It's not good for us to do this." It turned out that the guy didn't realize that the little jailer was Su Li after he had a big diarrhea just now. "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." Qin Gong's voice was so cold that Tang Lei was so scared that he didn't dare to say anything. Su Li shook her head slightly. Tang Lei's brain was also affected by taking poison all year round. He became stupid. She didn't know who hated him so much that they wanted to torture him to death in this way. The three of them came to the study in the back hall. Qin Gong and Tang Lei were immediately shocked by the cleanliness of the back hall. "Does Lecturer Su live here?" Tang Lei was stunned. In the empty house, not only did Su Li's writing paper, but also the whole bookshelf disappeared. There was no furniture in the whole room. The floor was so clean that it could be seen as a mirror. Obviously, it had been very carefully cleaned. Qin Gong looked dignified. From this, he could see that his opponent was terrifyingly cunning and would not be easy to deal with. Su Li walked in and walked to the wall where the desk was originally placed. She tapped the stone bricks in a strange way, and the solid stone bricks gradually became loose. Su Li grasped the right time and moved quickly to the right. The ground of the whole house rumbled. Slowly, the floor in the middle of the room moved away, revealing a stone staircase leading downwards. Su Li looked calm. No matter how many times she saw the ingenuity of the mechanism of the Tianhe country, she would be amazed. Qin Gong and Tang Lei were even more surprised. Qin Gong's eyes were full of horror. He recognized the origin of the mechanism and asked, "Is this left by your master?" "No." Su Li shook her head and said, "This is a gift from my senior fellow apprentice." Her cultivation was not high enough to find the dark iron addendum. The senior fellow apprentice that she had never met was obviously not only a master of medical circle, but also had a talent in the mechanism that ordinary people could not reach. One day when she read the notes left by the senior fellow apprentice, she used the words of the Ghost Valley meditation direction to unravel the secret of the tunnel. It could be seen that the senior fellow apprentice was meticulous. Senior fellow apprentice, a figure of a cold-faced young man flashed in Qin Gong's mind. His origin was much more mysterious than Su Li's. He had never revealed his real name. He only let those playboys call him Lecturer Yu. When the three of them walked down the stone staircase, the mechanism above their heads was gradually closed. The walls on both sides immediately lit up automatically, illuminating the stone room. This stone room was much larger than the study on the ground. It almost covered the entire underground space of the affiliated school. It was hard for Su Li to imagine how the senior fellow apprentice solved the underground stone soil, which was not much softer than the dark iron. Bypassing several stone pillars, Qin Gong and Tang Lei followed Su Li to a place with a layout similar to that of the pharmacy. The walls were full of medicine cabinets, and there was an old ladder next to it. It seemed that it had not been used for a long time. There were messy bottles and jars on the huge medicine table. The smell of medicine mixed together and became very strange, but it made Tang Lei feel very comfortable. It seemed that his weakness also disappeared a little. "Lord Qin." Su Li called him. Qin Gong immediately took out a porcelain bottle, which contained the poisonous stomach lump from Ma Ling's body. After Su Li took it, she threw it into a transparent container, sealed it and threw it aside. Then she turned around and put the medicinal materials in the bamboo basket on the medicine cabinet one by one. She said, "Lord Qin, I need 4 hours to refine the antidote. Why don't you stroll around? Senior fellow apprentice left me a lot of strange books. They are in the bookshelf on the left. It is very interesting to read." After saying that, Su Li turned the switch and entered the deeper alchemy room. Seeing the colorless container filled with Ma Ling's stomach lump became colorful and colorful, Chen Gong twitched his mouth. He walked to the bookshelf and took down a book. Then he really read it quietly. Only Tang Lei was dumbfounded and didn't know what to do. What antidote? Looking at the smile of Lord Chen Gong, he had an illusion that he was in a dream. In the spacious alchemy room, the stone door made a dull sound and was closed slowly. The light was not dim. It could be seen that the shelves on the wall were full of bottles and jars. There were also many yellow files. It was obvious that they were more precious than those outside. The smile on Su Li's face disappeared, and she became indifferent when she was alone. She ignited the high-quality charcoal and waited for the temperature to gradually rise. Then she was lost in deep thought. It was not difficult to guess the planner behind this matter. Without the Baiwei building in Suli in Yunjing City, the one who benefited the most was not the playboys, but Wu Xiuxiu of the Wu family. After such a long time, the owner behind the Baiwei building was not a secret in the upper circle. How could she not know who it was? But it was one thing to think of it, and another thing to find evidence to prove it. Chen Gong must show convincing evidence to clear the suspicion of the Baiwei building and make it a victim from the perpetrator. The Wu family was always ruthless. Su Li could imagine that they had destroyed all the things removed from the ground of the affiliated school, and most of the things that disappeared from Ma Ling's body had been destroyed. Thinking of this, Su Li frowned tightly. There was no way now. It seemed that she had to make plans after she tested the poison. Time ticked by. Perhaps Tang Lei felt bored, so he moved close to Chen Gong and began to read. The content of the ancient book was so marvelous that Tang Lei was shocked. His inexperienced look made Chen Gong laugh in a low voice again and again. Gradually, Tang Lei's fear of Chen Gong weakened. They talked about what happened recently, and Tang Lei knew that something big happened in the Baiwei building. Lord, what did you say? Ma Ling and others are all dead? Tang Lei was shocked. He lowered his head and murmured, someone dares to kill Ma Ling. It shouldn't be. I met him that day. He was happy and said. What did he say? Chen Gong put away the ancient book, and his eyes were clear. He didn't expect that Tang Lei had contact with Ma Ling that day. Ma Ling and others usually like to bully me and show off everything to me. Tang Lei shrank his neck and said in a panic, although I hate them, I never want to kill them. Lord Chen, I didn't kill them. Chen Gong was so angry that he laughed, I know it's not you. What did they say that day? If Tang Lei could kill people, the sun would rise from the west. Tang Lei breathed a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that Chen Gong would misunderstand and directly take him to the Ministry of Penalty. He stared at Chen Gong and recalled carefully. Suddenly, his eyes brightened and he said happily, I remember. Ma Ling said that he would soon become a formal student of the National Academy and then get rid of the identity of the affiliated school. He also asked me if I wanted to go with them. What? Chen Gong immediately felt strange. With Ma Ling's talent and learning, it was impossible for him to enter the National Academy. Even if his father dared to bribe the National Academy blatantly, it was impossible. Under the feet of the emperor, the National Academy was the most unbearable. How could Ma Weiming dare to be unlucky? So, who promised him that Ma Ling would go to the National Academy? Ma Ling was not a fool. The person who gave him the guarantee must have a high status. He deceived Ma Ling with a good reason and let Ma Ling do something. Thinking of this, Chen Gong suddenly felt numb and terrified. If Ma Ling really poisoned him, how could he investigate it? How did Ma Ling poison him? Seeing Chen Gong suddenly showing such a terrible expression, Tang Lei couldn't help but step back in fear. Suddenly, there was a sound of the stone door behind him. He was so scared that he fell to the ground. Then he looked back and saw Su Li coming out of the alchemy room. A fragrance of elixirs filled the air. Su Li glanced at Chen Gong who was lost in thought and didn't disturb him. She walked to Tang Lei and handed a bottle of elixirs. She whispered, take one elixir every 3 days. You can recover after 21 days. But your appearance will not change, in case of alerting the enemy. Go to the Ling house and live there. Tell your good brother exactly what I said. Only in this way can you save your life. Do you understand? Tang Lei nodded quickly and put away the elixirs confusedly. He didn't understand, so he could only remember that sentence and tell it to Brother Ling later. But one thing was clear. The little jailer was not a bad person. Her expression when she told him carefully was exactly the same as his dead mother's concern when she died. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.